I'm Heather Lahey-Jeffries, Noah Jeffries' mother and the author of Outskirts of Heaven, both here and the other side. I wrote Outskirts in September of 2019, 1 month before the annual memorial event we hold to commemorate Noah's life. It's also to celebrate the lives of those who are the recipients of his organ donation. That year, we were raising the funds to donate ballistic vests to the Polk Sheriff's Office K-9 unit. I tried to pick a cause that was important to Noah, something he believed in, or had he survived, would have been giving his time and energy to firsthand. It's the best way I can honor him. And also, he would think having a memorial event just to honor him was ridiculous and embarrassing. I have to make a dual purpose lest I invoke his wrath. I'm kidding. Noah was probably one of the least wrathful people I've ever known. He just didn't like anyone making him the center of attention. He always thought there were more important or interesting things to do or talk about. He was extremely unselfish, always putting others first. This book, Outskirts of Heaven, it came about because of the number of people who ask me what happened that night, or what was I thinking, or how did we handle everything between the time of the accident to the memorial service. Please understand that this is written entirely from my perspective as these events unfolded. I wrote it as honestly and real as I possibly could, in the hopes that it might be helpful to someone else possibly going through something similar. I chose to create this audio version as many people have asked if I was considering it, and I thought it was a great idea, but in the quest to find the right narrator, I started to realize that this book, this personal journal really, would probably carry more weight for the listener if I was the narrator. Now, this to me was a terrifying realization, not because I was nervous to read aloud or make the recording, but because I haven't read this book since its last edit in 2019. I don't like to. It's entirely too painful. Now, the thought of sitting and reading it aloud, reliving it all over again, the idea was nauseating. Even Bud, Noah's dad, he read through the book one time the first night that I finished writing the last page. And then he said, "It's amazing and wonderful. It's horrible and painful. I love it. It's perfect. And I never want to have to read it again." This may be too uncomfortably personal and raw for some people to listen to. I get that. I did it in one take, both because I needed to in order to get through it, but as well as to make it natural, as if I was telling you about it firsthand and in person. This book and audio are for those who will never have the opportunity to meet Noah, so you might know a glimmer of who he was and wanted to be for the world and community we all share. It's the why of why we built Noah's Army Foundation. It's also for those who knew and loved him and wonder what happened, but don't want to ask us out of respect. I appreciate your time and hope that the moments you use to listen to this, no doubt in chunks, because seriously, who has time to listen to an audio file for 3.5 hours? But that it gives you a sense of Noah, answers some questions, and gives you cause to appreciate those you love and the time you have with them here. And now, the Outskirts of Heaven, both here and the other side. A brief biography of Noah Jeffries and the establishment of Noah's Army Foundation.
A testimony to Noah. It's a sad, dark day today. Superman has flown away. Or so it seemed to all of us, squinting in his cloud of dust. We must be gone, we declared. Everything's heavy, even the air. That's how it feels at the end, what it feels like when never again. Because heaven seems so far from here, so beyond our eyes and ears. But we also know a man's worth isn't measured by his time on earth. And we still feel his love in our veins. So take heart in what remains. Every action, every thought, every lesson that he taught, his smiles so genuine and wide, the gentle strength he exemplified. While grieve we will, and must, look also beyond this earthly dust, for the kingdom's not simply here or there, but within us always, everywhere. And Superman's within us, too, still standing for what's right and true. Close your eyes when you have need. He'll surely speak, and we must heed. For he'll inspire us, put us to labor, and it'll be us caring for our neighbor. And with tearful eyes they'll surely say, "Thank God, Superman saved the day." Written by USMC Sergeant Matthew and Kelly Bishop. These are people who Noah deeply admired, respected, and loved. Our purpose. This book was written with the intention of sharing our story in the most raw and transparent way possible, to give you the greatest understanding of what comes from living an unselfish, respectful, and generous life regardless of age. When we each strive to be the strongest version of ourselves, our lives can become gifts to those around us. Gifts of inspiration, motivation, encouragement, and commitment. It's knowing our own assets, those that are physical, mental, and spiritual, and then choosing to hone them to master levels to benefit not only ourselves, but the world around us. Then, living that life respectfully, kindly, and graciously. Anyone can be this, no matter their position, station in life, or age. It is a depth of character we all possess and are all capable of, but few choose to exude. We hope that our son's life and passion can be an example to others to choose the good and the right, just as he inspired us to build Noah's army to continue standing for others and being a source of goodwill and strength. Noah's mom and dad, Heather and Bud Jeffries. Forward. The life of Noah Jeffries was brief, but grand, and in the ethos I feel him cringe for having used a word like grand to describe him. He was humble. It's not a common trait found among most any age group of people these days, but that was him. He did not like to talk about his successes, his goals, his dreams, nor himself. He was confident yet quiet about who he knew himself to be, and of that which he was capable. When his father and I would meet his friends, and happened to bring up in conversation something he had achieved, his friends' eyes would widen and look at him in shock and disbelief. Noah would quickly flush red with embarrassment and then do his best to get us to change the subject or gloss over it as if it were no big deal. No big deal. And he truly believed that about himself. He was no big deal. An average Joe. No one special. He was ordinary and the common man. Well, perhaps he was, but if so, it was the common man who no longer exists. The man who helps his neighbors with a moment's notice, has little fear, and if any exists, he steps out specifically to conquer it. He has a depth of character, kindness, a sense of humor, courtesy, and a genuine grace that makes everyone feel welcome and accepted. He's capable of building, designing, repairing, and analyzing. He's resilient, intelligent, compassionate, dedicated, sincere, honorable, trustworthy, and always has your six. Then there's the physical brawn, the capacity of strength to move mountains, and the awareness and understanding of fight, but the respect for all, and the knowing that it should be only used to protect and serve others. It seems to me that it is a foregone persona today, so rare in anyone, yet there he was, my son, Noah Jeffries, the boy who needed to protect and encourage everyone and everything. And he did it all with a beaming smile and an unparalleled warmth and laughter that puts you immediately at ease. He was never concerned about himself. He put everyone else first, always, even when they didn't know he was doing it. There was so much future in his life, not just for him, but for the world around him, and what he wanted to accomplish and be for others. He had ideas and plans that would have greatly benefited so many, protected the land, and would have inspired hope and kindness. when you're the person who has been in the proverbial observation tower over this person's life, watching the possibilities build and evolve and then seeing it all end without any warning, it's difficult to find the words to express the sorrow and devastation you feel, not just for the loss of this person you love and admire, but for the world around you as well. I find myself often stammering and stumbling in an attempt to fix a wrong or fill a void for others who have no clue what they lost because they hadn't even met him yet. For us, it's like we lost the hero of an epic saga in which we were deeply vested. For us, Noah was the Lord of the Rings Aragorn or Game of Thrones Jon Snow. He was to us the good, the great, and the hope. And now, well, now we are left with the hope that we honor him well and we make him proud by continuing to find ways to better our community and our world. Hurricane Irma. It was September 8th, 2017. Floridians were tracking Hurricane Irma. Heading for the Keys and expected to ride her way around the peninsula, spaghetti models gave varying reports on which direction she would take. The most popular opinion was Irma would ride up the Gulf Coast, turn northeast, making landfall around Fort Myers, and then tear a path straight up the center of the state. It would be one of the strongest hurricanes to cut through central counties in many years, and certainly the first one Noah had ever experienced. Noah had turned 21 just shy of 2 months earlier, on July 11th. He was the sporting clays manager for Florida Wildlife Commission's Tenoroc Range in Lakeland. Tenoroc was his home course, and where he began sporting clays competitions at the age of 13. At that time, the range was privately owned, and when he turned 14, the owners began allowing Noah to volunteer time cleaning up shells and helping to set up free events, in exchange for range time in clays, so he could practice. When he was 17, the range sold to the state to become part of their park system, and Noah lost his position since no one under the age of 18 could work in the facility around firearms. A few months after his 18th birthday, the FWC manager of Tenoroc tracked him down to let him know that a position had come open for a range safety officer if he was interested. Noah had always dreamed of serving in the military, in special forces, or becoming a law enforcement officer, and eventually a U.S. Marshal. He had one hang-up. A distant cousin, who was a Polk County Sheriff's deputy and weapons specialist, had once told Noah that he went to the Sheriff's Academy at 18, and his mom had to sign for his service weapon. Noah swore that he would wait till he was 21 and could sign for his own, so he opted to take the job at Tenoroc in March of 2015, knowing he wouldn't be going to the academy until fall of 2017 or spring of 2018, depending on which one he could get into, but the sooner the better. Having competed in sporting clays since the age of 13, Noah had won numerous competitions, state, regional, and national titles, as well as being a two-time All-American by the age of 18. It did not take long for FWC to move him to sporting clays manager, as well as have him traveling to other state-run clays courses to help with setup and design. The job also brought Noah the opportunity to work with large numbers of local law enforcement officers and U.S. military. He especially loved that part. Talking and working with them was always a great honor for him. The plans the state had for Tenoroc's range excited Noah, and he took pride in the design work, but that was also just Noah. He always took pride in the things he did, and believed that doing your best was the only thing that was acceptable, no matter the task. On September 8th, as weather forecasters continued to announce the trajectory path of Hurricane Irma, FWC began issuing warnings for the employees to get their facilities ready to withstand the storm as best possible. Tenoroc had just finished building some courses and stands, all of which Noah had a special hand in. He rode the course, taking pictures of the property and the work they had done. He had always loved the outdoors and the different wildlife areas of Tenoroc. It wasn't uncommon for him to take photos of nature and his surroundings, always appreciating the quiet simplicity of life and nature that many people tend to overlook today. However, that day was different. He felt a deep concern that things were going to go wrong, and quickly. He wasn't sure if it was the pending storm and sensationalized broadcasts which tend to elicit feelings of unnecessary hysteria and panic, or something else. But he drove through the park system, taking photos and remembering. At the time, I was working an hour away in Wauchula when the owner of the company decided to close the office and send everyone home so they could get ready for the storm. I was told to pack up my office of personal items and to take the laptop home with me just in case the storm did come through and I needed to work from home for a while. Halfway into the drive home, Noah called me, and the conversation went like this. He asked, "Hey, Ma, where are you?" And I answered, "I'm heading back to Lakeland. They closed the office and sent everyone home. Why? What's up?" Noah said, "I don't know. We just finished prepping everything at the range. I'm going to head home in a bit. What are you guys planning to do? Are you going to stay at the house with the dogs? Dana's grandma and Aunt Teresa are going to be alone, so she's going to go stay with them and make sure that they're okay. I'd like to go stay with them to make sure all three of them are covered if you guys don't need me. I mean, I know Dana can handle anything, but I'd feel better knowing I was there if something goes wrong and they need more help." I replied, "Your dad and I talked about it. He's going to stay with Nanny and Aunt Angie since they'll be alone at Nanny's house. I'm going to go to Mom and Pap's house to make sure they're okay, and I'm going to take the dogs with me. You do whatever you feel is right. We'll be fine." He paused for a moment, and then he asked, "Are you sure?" I answered, "Sure about what? That it's okay for you to go? You're 21, responsible, and strong. You're good in a crisis. You always keep calm, and you get the job done. I can't imagine anyone better to send somewhere." He said, "No, I mean, are you sure you'll be fine?" I said, "Yeah, why wouldn't we be? I mean, other than a freak thing like the storm is strong enough to knock down the house or a tornado hits, but yeah, in the center of the state, it's not that likely." Again, he paused, and I could hear the short sigh he always made when he was bothered by something. He didn't want to admit something was wrong. I asked, "Okay, what is it? I heard the sigh. What's the matter?" He asked, "Can I tell you something?" I answered, "Well, yeah, always." Noah took an audible breath and then said, "Something feels really wrong, really weird. I mean, I feel stupid saying this, but I feel like I'm not going to be here much longer, as though something really bad is going to happen to this storm or something. I feel like everything is about to change permanently. I can't figure out if it's me or you guys or Dana. I just feel like something bad is coming and one of us isn't going to be here anymore. I actually feel kind of scared." I had never in his lifetime heard my son say he was scared of something. Never. When he was a small child, he said things were scary, but I never heard him say he himself was scared. He was 21 and taller than me. There were only 2 times since he was 12 that I had felt compelled to hug him or comfort him like a child in order to try to soothe the emotional pain he was feeling. He wasn't a complainer. He didn't like overly sentimental displays of affection or people gushing over him. I always tried to be respectful of it, but there are times when your child says something or experiences something, and it doesn't matter what age he or she is, you just want to pull them into your lap and hold them till it goes away. And that was how I felt in that moment, driving up Highway 17, still 30 minutes away from our house. I did the only thing I could think of. I went with logic. I didn't want to downplay his feelings, and he wasn't an alarmist. He didn't normally say things like that, but he responded better to reason, so I answered calmly, "Buddy, and I'm really sorry you feel that way, but it's honestly probably just the intensity of everyone right now. You know how things are. The media needs to hype things, and yes, hurricanes are destructive, particularly for coastal areas, but for the most part, at least further inland where we are, it's mostly just a lot of rain and wind. Stuff blows around, things get knocked over, power goes out. Unfortunately, sometimes trees come down on houses, things get damaged, and every great once in a while there's some flooding to homes. It's hugely inconvenient and messy, but we clean up, we get the power back on, and we keep going. This is also the first real hurricane you've personally been through that you would remember. There were 2 others when you were a baby and then a toddler, but you wouldn't have any reason to remember them. And between the news broadcasts, having to batten down Tenorock, helping other people secure their property, and the 3 of us splitting up to go different places, maybe it's all making you feel unsettled and weird? He said, yeah, I guess. I mean, okay, that makes sense. I just can't shake it, though. I can't help the feeling like I'm not going to be here much longer, and I absolutely hate that I am saying that to you. I said, I know. It's okay. Please try not to worry. When you go through stuff like this, it's natural to have moments where you might feel things like that. I'm not trying to diminish what you feel or anything. I'm just saying that the odds are likely it has more to do with the thought of the unknown in a dangerous situation. Just know, please, that I love you. We love you, and we know you love us. I mean, in the end, that is absolutely the only thing that matters. And that never, ever ends. It transcends everything, and it stays with you and your soul. Always. Noah said, love you too, Mom. I know, you're probably right, but all makes sense anyway. He laughed and continued, thank you for talking me down from the crazy. I'll see you at home. I tapped the disconnect call on my steering wheel and kept driving. Now I was the one who felt ill at ease. I'm not the person who flies into hysterics because a storm is coming. We live in Florida. It's hurricane central. It comes with the territory, and I have been here for most of my life. Personally, I find things like wildfires, earthquakes, and tornadoes far more unsettling. As I drove home, I suddenly started to feel like things were about to change dramatically. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something did feel different. I told myself it was just the suggestion of what he had said, but then I was the one who couldn't shake it. Quite frankly, our family had had enough change from November of 2016 up to that point in September of 2017. Bud's mom, Shirley, had a terrible car accident. Then suddenly, when his mom had just started to improve from her injuries, his father, Bernard, well, his health began to decline rapidly with him passing away in December. My grandmother, Mary, then passed away in January. In February, Bud's mother had to have emergency surgery due to injuries from the accident. His sister, Angie, was diagnosed with breast cancer in June, and Noah's then didn't know he was going to pop the question fiancé, grandmother, Dottie, had to have spinal surgery, and then Dana's Aunt Teresa was also diagnosed with cancer. I arrived home at the same time as Noah, who had been across town helping some friends prep their houses and secure things. He was taking things from his room and loading them in Dana's Jeep, who drove over with him. Items I didn't understand why he was moving. He explained that he was concerned if something happened and no one could get back to the house for a few days, that someone could try and break in. He wanted to take the things that were the most invaluable to him, to her grandmother's, so that he could keep them safe. Then he said he was going to take his Harley instead of his truck. He said he was thinking that if the barn was damaged, someone would be able to see it from the road, and it could be stolen. Then he said something I will never forget. Besides, motorcycles can get through in places where standard and larger vehicles can't. At the time, I took that to mean if something happened, he could still get through to get home. We hugged goodbye, and he took off. The storm wasn't on track to hit us till Sunday evening the 10th, so Bud and I finished getting things ready for our own house, then headed out Sunday afternoon for our lockdown locations. When the sun came up the morning after the storm had moved through, most areas were without power. Many homes had storm damage. Streets were barricaded with debris of fallen trees, overturned vehicles, and boats. Our cell phones were still working. After we had all touched base with each other, saying everyone was fine, as were all of our homes, Noah said he was going to stay there because there was so much damage in the area he felt he needed to stay to help neighborhood and Dana's grandmother. The office where I worked in Wauchula did not fare as well. Hardy County was hard hit by the storm, with extensive damage and power outages that lasted for over a week. The office was tremendously damaged, and I was told to just sit tight and work from home till they had a solution. When Noah was able to get back into Tenorock, he was frustrated to learn that much of the range had been torn apart by the storm, and it would be some time before they were fully functional, with everything open to the public again. He went back to work, repairing and servicing everything they could as quickly as possible. For the next 3 weeks, as crews worked to restore Florida to its pre-hurricane state, I continued to work from home and was rather thankful for it, because it was allowing me to spend more time with Noah and Bud. We had always been an extremely tight-knit family, mostly self-employed, and we had homeschooled Noah. We truly enjoyed each other's company. Noah would be leaving soon, heading for Polk State College for public safety and becoming a sheriff's deputy and marrying Dana. I was grateful for the time I got to have with him during those weeks working from home. Noah never mentioned his concerns again regarding his mortality. I chalked it up to being a passing thought associated with the unrest that comes from a pending natural disaster. He didn't say anything, and knowing him well, I knew he'd rather me not mention it. We'd been through that before, of him confessing an emotion he didn't like feeling. If I asked about it at a later date, I got the look and the response of, "I don't want to talk about that." As September came to a close, I was informed that the company had found a suitable situation for now. It was smaller, and people were sharing spaces, but it would do, and I was asked to return to the office Friday, September 29th, to get my desk area arranged, tour the setup, and get things ready to start back on Monday, October 2nd. That Friday morning, as I drove down to Wauchula, everything felt strange. I told myself it was just the oddity of the situation. The landscape was somewhat different due to the storm damage. Buildings and homes were down, billboards were missing. It all had a faint, apocalyptic feeling to it. When I arrived at the new office, something still felt wrong. Like I should go home. I should not have left. I again dismissed it as just a reaction to the entire situation, but I couldn't shake it. Monday morning, October 2nd, I drove down to Wauchula again, and the feeling still loomed over me. I wanted to go home so badly and see my son and just be with my family. I am not normally a clingy person. I don't generally have issues going anywhere or being away from home. The entire day, I felt like I was crawling out of my skin to want to go home and see them. I knew logically that they were planning on leaving just before 5 because we were all to be at a friend's birthday party that evening. A World War II veteran who was celebrating his 92nd birthday, Stan Moore, was a longtime friend of Bud's family and someone who had watched Noah grow up and thought so well of him. And Noah, who had such a very deep respect for the military and those who serve, would do anything for Mr. Stan. We were all looking forward to being there to celebrate this man's life. As I left the office that afternoon, a very strange feeling came over me as I walked to my car. I felt like it was the last time I would be there again. I couldn't explain it, and it made no sense, as I had no intention of leaving, but it hung over me like a weight that I couldn't throw. Nothing felt good that evening, even though I was heading to the only place that I wanted to be. It would only be hours later, but I would soon know why. The day the world stopped. We all arrived at Mr. Stan's birthday get-together being held by his family. It was a simple event with cake and drinks, and our family was all to have dinner at Bud's mother's house afterwards. Those get-togethers now consisted of Bud's mom, Shirley, aka Nanny, his younger sister, Angie, her son and daughter, Justin and Laveda, and Bud's other sister's daughter, Mackenzie. Mackenzie was living at Shirley's, working in Lakeland, while Bud's sister, Becky, her sons, Levi and Caleb, and husband, Dwayne, all lived in New Orleans. Regardless the distance, the family was tight. The cousins were all extremely close, both in age and relationship. Noah, the oldest of the grandchildren, saw all of his younger cousins more like brothers and sisters. He adored all of them. Tenorock was still in a state of disrepair from Hurricane Irma, and Noah had been at work that day working to clean up. Bud and I were already at Stan's party waiting for Noah to arrive. He came rolling up on his Harley and parked, facing the main doors where Mr. Stan could see him. Evidently, at an earlier time, he and Stan had discussed the bike and Stan had said someday he sure would like to see it with Noah riding it. The Harley-Davidson was Noah's pride and joy. When he was 5, Bud had included among some of his gifts for Christmas a blue Harley-Davidson Hot Wheels type replica. Noah always loved motorcycles, but that toy became one of his favorites and something he kept on a shelf in his room his entire life. When he was 16 and got his driver's license, he began insisting that one day he would definitely have a motorcycle. We gave him a motorcycle riding course and safety lessons for Christmas when he was 18, which included the ability to add motorcyclist to his driving license. After taking the course and adding it to his license, he began carefully driving friends' bikes, test riding motorcycles at different shops, and reading sale ads. He was a stickler for having things paid in full. He didn't like credit or paying on time. He preferred to save his money till he had it in hand and then could just pay straight for the thing that he wanted or needed. Yet it was more than just paying for the bike. It was a quest for the right one. Just after his 21st birthday, he found it. Dana actually found it, and the two of them went to check it out together. He came back that night to the house and was so excited, like a little boy, and said, "Ma, I found it! I found my bike!" I said, "That's great. What does it look like? Is it in good condition?" He said, "No, you don't understand. I found my bike. You know the one I've always had that Dad gave me? That one, the little blue Harley Sportster 883? It's that one. On 1995. It's unbelievable." He was so happy. He couldn't wait to bring it home. For Noah, it was a dream come true. He walked into the social center where the party was being held for Stan and greeted everyone as he usually did, but he held special respect and honor for Stan. Noah loved him deeply and greatly appreciated him. It was always obvious in the way Noah looked at him, like he was standing before a cherished and honored person in his life. Bud had brought 60-penny nails and carriage bolts, as he always did, for some entertainment for Stan's family. Bud had been a professional performing strongman throughout Noah's life. Touring the country, Noah had traveled with him and performed often himself. Noah grabbed one of the carriage bolts and began bending and then snapping it with his hands in unassuming Noah fashion. He looked amazing. I was always so proud of him, standing up there in one of his favorite dress shirts with the U.S. flag lapel pin. I'm sure no one else noticed the pin, but I did. He always wore it. He bought it at a gas station somewhere off Interstate 10 when we were traveling to a sporting clays event when he was 14. He always had it on either his hat or his shirt. It was just part of him, his attire. As the party ended, Stan made his way outside to check out Noah's bike. He and Stan stood around with it for a while, and then Stan asked Noah if he would drive it around a bit so he could watch him. Noah obliged the request around the parking area, then returned to hug Stan goodbye. We all left at the same time. We were in our car with Noah behind us. I could hear his bike gunning and rumbling. His helmet was a full protection with dark facial shield. I couldn't see his face in my rearview mirror, just the astronaut-looking, leather-jacketed man and his machine. But I knew he was smiling. I could feel his joy. It was only 3 miles from the location of the party at Stan's retirement village back to my mother-in-law's house. Noah was in my rearview mirror for the first mile. As I turned right onto Main Street, I noticed I didn't hear his bike anymore, and he was no longer in my view. Another 500 feet, and my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Noah. He had pulled over to make some calls and was checking with me to see if I thought anyone in our family would mind if he went over to Danny's grandmother's house. He wanted to say goodbye to her Uncle Jay, who was leaving to go back to Tennessee instead of going to dinner at Nanny's house, but he would try to stop by there on his way home later. Noah had become extremely close with Dana's family, greatly loving and respecting all of them. Jay is Teresa's husband. They live in Tennessee, but Teresa was staying with her mother while taking her cancer treatment at the Moffitt Center in Tampa. Jay would come to Lakeland as often as he could to be with her, but had to get back for work, and Noah wanted to say goodbye to him that night. Dinners were a common thing in our family, so I didn't think anyone would mind, and told him so. The conversation was less than a minute long. At 7:38 p.m., Bud and I headed to his mother's house, knowing Noah was several car lengths behind us and would be now heading to Dana's grandmother's house. Even though he said he would stop by, as it grew later, I assumed he was running late and texted him receiving no response, which was odd. It wasn't until we arrived home at 10 p.m. when I noticed I had missed a call from a local number. It took me a second, but I realized with a cold chill that I recognized the number. It was our local area hospital's main line, which does not register with a name. I had a voicemail. My finger fumbled as I tried to tap the icons quickly enough to retrieve it, suddenly feeling like there were too many steps. Terrified of what I might hear and praying it was just a misdialed mistake. The caller said, "Yes, this message is for Heather Jeffries. Miss Jeffries, this is the emergency room charge nurse at Lakeland Regional Medical Center. Please call me back immediately at..." My heart was beating out of my chest. It could only be Noah, my mother, or my father. They were the only three people I could think of who would have me as an emergency contact, and everyone else I knew was accounted for. Bud called from the other room. "What's going on?" I called back. "I don't know yet," as I haphazardly dialed the number the nurse had left in the message. She was also the one to pick up as I sat down at a bar stool at our kitchen counter. All I could think about was that Noah had never texted me back, which was extremely uncommon. The nurse began, "Yes, ma'am. Miss Jeffries, could you please tell me if you know a William Noah Jeffries?" I thought I would vomit as I questioningly answered, "Yes." She continued, "Could you please tell me the date of William's birth?" I answered, "July 11th, 1996. She asked, "Miss Jeffries, what is your relationship to William?" I said, "I'm his mother, and he goes by Noah. He likely won't respond to William, Will, or Bill, or any other form of William." She questioned, "Miss Jeffries, do you know your son was involved in a motorcycle accident this evening?" I wanted to scream, cry, vomit, wail, you name it, as I answered, "No. What happened? How is he?" I started to try to be rational, telling myself this isn't worst case scenario. You don't know anything. He may just have a broken leg, an arm, and he'll come home tonight. Don't lose control of yourself yet. I will never forget her reply as she said, "I can't really tell you anything. Just get here as soon as you can. We are still trying to stabilize him." I'm staring at the clock on the microwave. It's 10:02 p.m. They're still trying to stabilize him? How long has he been there? How long have they been trying to stabilize him? That just can't be good. I got up and I ran into the dining room yelling to Bud in the living room, "We have to go now. Noah was in an accident." He came running as we tripped over each other, trying to get out the door, and grabbing the keys, wallets, and phones. He asked, "Is he okay?" I said, "I don't know." She didn't say. She just said he'd been in an accident and they were trying to stabilize him. He just looked at me for a long moment as we headed for the car, and then he asked, "How long has he been there?" I said, "She didn't say that either." I was driving. He called his mother's house, and his sister Angie answered. He quickly explained. I asked him to please call my parents, Noah's mom and pap, Terry and Wes. They only lived across town and would be there for him quickly. As he's on the phone with my mom and dad, I thought of Dana. We only live 4 miles from the hospital. By then I was already sitting at a red light waiting to cross the road to turn into the emergency room's entrance. I took my phone out and called Dana. Instead of her usual way of saying, "Hello," her voice cracked a little, and I could hear the concern as she instead asked, "Noah?" It was my phone. It was my caller ID she would have seen on her screen. Why did she only ask Noah? I said, "Hey, baby, listen, I am so sorry, but Noah was in an accident. We're just now pulling up to the hospital. I don't know anything yet. All the nurse said they were still trying to stabilize him." She said, "I'll be right there." I asked, "Wait, why when you picked up did you ask if I were Noah?" She said, "Because he never got here. I've been trying to call him since about 8:15. Again, a cold chill went down my spine. He never got there? Does that mean they've been trying to stabilize him for over 2 hours? Sitting in a parking space designated for emergency vehicles only, Bud told me to get out and go in. He would go park the car in visitor parking and be right behind me. I couldn't feel my legs as I walked across the ambulance drive to the waiting room doors. I had my phone in a wallet case with my ID, and that was it as I walked through the metal detectors. I was asked to leave it in a tray while I walked through the scanner. I turned back around to get my phone, but the officers had moved the tray to another table. I couldn't reach around the scanner. They were talking amongst themselves as I tried to get their attention. Sir? Sir? Excuse me, please? I need my phone and my ID, please. My son was in an accident. Please. In that situation, you feel like the whole world should just know this is the worst moment of your life. And how could they not? Don't they understand there was just a rip in the universe? Didn't they feel it too? Why is everyone not getting out of the way and being accommodating? Still trying to stay in control, I made my way to the information desk and asked. My son was in an accident. The ER charge nurse called me. His name is William Noah Jeffries. Where is he, please? I need to see him. I need to see him. No, lady, you don't understand. I'm not kidding here. I need to. I have to. This person, this young man, this boy, he's my whole life. Nothing, absolutely nothing matters or makes sense without him. This whole thing doesn't work without him. I need to see my son. Where is my boy? She said, if you could please just sit over there, those doors, someone will come to get you. My life is falling apart. Everything's closing in and nothing makes sense right now. And she wants me to sit in some chairs and wait. Don't do anything. Just wait. I'm not good at this. My mind keeps playing over and over again the charge nurse's tone as she said, we're still trying to stabilize him. Then the fact that Noah never arrived at Dana's. It was only a 20-minute ride from where we were to her grandmother's house. He should have been there by 8 p.m. My thoughts were racing. How long? How long did it take to get him in the ambulance? How bad was it? I've seen people have trouble stabilizing and then go home 2 days later. Maybe that would happen now? Please, please, God, please let that happen now. Please, God, please send extra angels, miracles. And would someone please come out here and tell me something? Bud found me and sat down. No news yet. We sat, holding hands and waiting. Then the doors opened and a nurse walked towards us. Miss Jeffries? I jumped up and we headed towards her. Yes? She walked us into the alcove and began telling us he had a fractured left leg, right arm, broken clavicle, and from what they could determine, most all of his facial bones were broken. They were concerned there may be some internal bleeding, as they couldn't get his pressure to stabilize. The surgeon on call wanted to take him to the OR and open him up to try to find the bleed. Suddenly, the alcove was filling with family members, Dana and her family, as well as police officers. I was trying to be pragmatic, telling them about his insurance and his cards. They should all be in his wallet. What info did they need from me, and was anyone else involved in the accident? Whose fault was it? And how long before I would see him? An officer appeared next to me. Miss Jeffries, I was the responding officer. It does not appear at this time that it was your son's fault. The other driver failed to yield to his right way, but there will of course be an investigation to determine everything. No one else was injured. I asked, where did this happen? What time? He said, on Main Street at Complex Drive, around 7:45 p.m. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach. I spoke to him at 7:38. I was on Main Street when he called me. That means he hung up the phone, put it back in his pocket, situated his helmet, got back on the road, and then turned right on Main Street a few cars behind us. I turned left off of a side street to head to Bud's mom's house, and Noah would have driven behind me, continuing on Main, heading east another mile, and then was struck. How could my son have been hit by another vehicle, laying on the street only a mile away from me, while I sat, laughing with family, and was completely unaware? How is that possible? I thought about the fact that we had stopped at the grocery store nearest our home and Bud's mom's house just before heading to hers. I had stayed in the car, taking a call from a work colleague while Bud ran in. I was parked, facing the road, and I could hear sirens from that direction on Main Street, which ran parallel to the road the store was on. If there had been no buildings or trees across the street, I would have been able to see the emergency vehicles from where I was parked. Yet I was clueless, and the most horrible sense of guilt washed over me, as though I should have known. My son was laying in the street in pain, and less than 6 blocks away, and I was sitting in our air-conditioned car having a pleasant conversation talking about work and an exciting upcoming project. As of the time of this writing, 2 years after the accident, this thought still eats away at me. I snapped back to the voices and the commotion around us as the nurse appeared again. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffries, I can take you back to see him now. We have him stabilized enough. They're going to take him to surgery. Do you want to see him? Will you be okay to see him? He has a lot of facial trauma. We didn't hesitate to say yes. I started to walk with her. I stopped and looked over my shoulder at Dana. She was never a weak girl. She didn't shirk or shrink away from things that were difficult or hard. I knew she would want to be with him, and I had no intention of standing in her way. I noticed her grandmother wanting to suggest we let her go too, but being so respectful of us in the moment. I asked, Dana, do you want to come? She answered quickly, yes, and caught up with us. The surgeon was reviewing everything with us, but I didn't even care. I just wanted to get to know her. They had already listed his injuries. I just needed to be able to tell him I loved him and I believed in him. And if anyone could recover from this, it was him. That was all that I cared about. I wanted to touch him so badly. My arms and my hands ached for it, but I didn't want to hurt him. At that point, his face was so swollen he was nearly unrecognizable. He was somewhat conscious. I leaned down and said quietly, Noe, I'm here, buddy. Me and Dad and Dana, we are all right here. Everyone else is here too in the waiting room. We are all here for you, baby, okay? It's going to be okay. No matter what. You understand me? Everything will be okay. You are the strongest person I've ever known. If anyone can do this, it's you. I love you more than anyone, Snoop. Ever. Can you hear me at all, buddy? He nodded slightly and made a moaning sound. Dana stepped up next to me and said, Hey, handsome. You're going to be okay. I love you so, so much. Forever and always, handsome. She started to cry, just slightly, though. She was trying so hard not to for his sake. And I know he heard her because he started thrashing, trying to stand and get out of the bed for her. Bud came around and tried to calm him. Say, hey, buddy, it's okay. Calm down. Everything's going to be okay, all right? Relax. It's okay. I love you so much, Noah. The surgeon said they needed to take him right then, and someone would be back to take us to the surgical waiting area. We headed back out to meet everyone and update them. More officers had arrived who knew Noah and had heard of the accident while on shift and came to get an update. The charge nurse came back and escorted us to the waiting area where Bud and I began the daunting task of calling and texting Noah's friends. The vigil. The first nurse came out after about 20 minutes and said it would likely be about 4 to 6 hours before we would hear anything, so just try to relax and get comfortable. It was now just after 11:30 p.m., and the only surgeries taking place were emergency ones. It's a huge hospital that services a very large county, but our family members were the only ones in the expansive waiting area. I added Noah's Google account to my phone. He always told me his passwords in case he forgot them, which made me laugh. I had no trouble accessing anything in the aftermath of his accident. We always trusted him, and he felt the same way about us. There really was no reason for secrecy with the three of us. It's just how we were. I never thought about it either. It's the way our life was and how our family worked. It didn't occur to me until the moment I was logging into his account of how blessed we had been to have that kind of a relationship. I knew if I added his account to my phone, I could then sync his contacts and start calling people whose numbers I probably didn't have in mind. Who should I call first? I didn't know anything yet. I just knew it was bad, and I couldn't shake the thought of him telling me weeks earlier that he had the horrible feeling he wouldn't be around much longer. Chad was the first person I called. Chad and Abby Campbell were the first people I thought of who would want to know immediately. They met when Noah was 14. Chad was a young USMC veteran who worked at Tenorock when Noah volunteered at the range. By the time Noah was 18, they were close friends, and Noah loved hanging out at their house. It was one of his go-to places where he could usually be found. They quickly became among the people who would stay with us, never leaving our side, nor Noah's. Their families are amazing as well, and always made Noah feel loved. The friends Noah had through Tenorock were unbelievable. The ride-or-die type that everyone hopes for. Aaron Whitehead, Robert Anderson, Charles and Lucian Haddad, Chris Lutz, Safari Charlie, Jeff Walker, Lynn Oakley, Jay Stinger, and so many other incredible people. I didn't even know how to make these calls. This was so horrible to have to tell these people who I knew so deeply loved him. I think what was worse was, for many of them, it wasn't even how much they loved him, but that he was everyone's rock. He was the one who was stable and could be counted on and made sure that everyone was always okay. I sat scrolling through his list of contacts. Tom, Dana's dad, walked in, still in his sheriff's deputy uniform. He had been on duty when he heard the call, and he went to the crash site. I couldn't even imagine how awful that was for him, or what it took to go there. One thing I knew for certain was that Dana's parents, Tom and Deb, loved Noah, and he felt the same way about them. I was always so grateful that Noah ended up getting along so wonderfully with Dana's family. I feel that's extremely important for a couple's future, and was thankful that they treated Noah like he really was their son. Only about 2 hours passed before a nurse came out and said they had finished and elected to move Noah to the TICU, Trauma Intensive Care Unit. They had not found any internal bleeding and felt his unstable pressure had to do with the severe trauma and his body's reaction to it. They would most likely take him back to surgery the next day to repair the damage to his leg and what now appeared to be some minor damage to 3 vertebrae. They would be back shortly to take us to the TICU family room, where we would again have to wait. Prayerful intent. Social media is a strange creature. It's a place where you can post the most intimate and traumatic moments of your life in some sort of public confessional. You can pick and choose who sees what, as well as whose input you care to read. It's also the most impersonal and fastest way to let large numbers of those who both sort of or closely know you about major events in your life. I was so completely focused on Noah and his medical changes moment to moment that I was unaware everyone around me had been posting prayer requests, good thought invocations, and what have you for Noah's condition. Just after 7 a.m. Tuesday morning, when my phone came out of its usual do not disturb mode, it blew up with direct messages and texts of people sending me prayers and get well soon wishes for Noah. As I sat by Noah's bed stroking his left hand, hoping and praying he would wake up, even though he was heavily sedated, my phone continued to vibrate in my pocket. I would check it every once in a while to make sure it wasn't someone who needed an immediate reply. But I was overwhelmed by the number of prayers that poured in. It made me recall Noah's prolific prayers as a child and teen. We lived next door to my in-laws for most of Noah's life. There was a dirt road through the orange grove that connected the properties, and at night I would drive down the dirt road to an open clearing, and there Noah and I would look at the stars through the windshield to stay out of the mosquito evenings in Florida. One night, when he was about 4, after he'd had his bath and was wearing one of his favorite oversized t-shirts to sleep in, he asked if we could take a grove ride and look at the stars. I so vividly remember him sitting on his knees looking out the passenger window with his little bare feet poking out from under the hem of his shirt. He broke the silence with, "Mama, you know that star poem thing you taught me? Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight." I answered, "Yes." Never turning around to look at me, still gazing skyward, he asked, "What's the difference between a wish and a prayer?" I always tried my best to give him truthful answers he could understand for the age he was, and said, "Well, I guess that kind of depends on the person. Not all people believe in praying, but because that means you're asking God or a God to help you or someone you care about. Not everyone believes in God, so I guess those people are wishing for the thing they want." He asked, "Don't people who pray wish for stuff too?" I guess the best answer I can give you for that is, wishing is hoping something happens that seems too big to actually come true. Praying is actually doing something about it when the thing you want to have happen is not within your power to control. Praying is giving every good thought, every ounce of love, every bit of hope, and every bit of light that you have in your spirit. It's focused intent. Intent means the thing that you want to have happen. So if you have a focused intent, it means you're thinking really, really hard about that thing being so. Does that make sense to you? He said, "I think so. I think I'm going to call them wish prayers from now on." I laughed and I asked why. Noah answered, "Because I'm going to think really, really hard that the things I ask God about will come true." From that day on, when he said a prayer, it was focused and deep and long, and he never missed the opportunity to ask for good things for others if we were already praying about something else. His prayer list at bedtime was pretty extensive because it always went like this: "Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Guide me, guard me through the night, and wake me with the morning light. God bless." And then this is where the list of people would begin. And if he knew anything about them personally that they needed help with, that was added in as well. Noah said his prayers every night before he closed his eyes, and some nights prayers took 15 to 20 minutes. We had to allot for that during bedtime planning, but my personal favorite was in 2008 when the movie Iron Man was released. Noah was 12 and had been waiting anxiously for the release date. He could not wait to see it. Iron Man quickly became one of his favorite superheroes, and the day that we took him to see the movie, he talked about it all evening afterwards. That night, as he headed to bed, he asked, "Hey Ma, the actor who plays Iron Man, what's his name?" I thought it was an odd question because he had never asked about an actor's name before. He was still more focused on the characters they portrayed. I answered, "Robert Downey Jr." "Why?" Noah said, "He's really good, you know? Sometimes I think it's hard for regular, real people to do superheroes in movies, but I really believed he was that guy, Tony Stark. He really was Iron Man." I'm a movie person, and growing up in the 80s, there's no way to not know who Robert Downey Jr. was. He was always an actor who I thought was particularly gifted in the way he portrayed the characters he was given. I had this moment of connection with my son over the appreciation of Downey's skill set, and then an awareness of Noah's maturity for seeing the man who was playing this role. Then Noah asked me something that confused and shocked me a bit. He asked, "Do you think he's okay?" I asked, "What? Who, the actor?" Noah, with true concern on his face, answered, "Yeah, Mr. Downey. Do you think he's okay?" I had no idea how to respond or why he was asking. I said, "I guess so. It's not like I know him personally, Noe. I mean, I hope he is." I know he made some choices earlier in his life that could make things difficult for him, but from what I have read, he recovered and he's doing well." Noah looked at me strangely and asked, "What kind of choices?" I said, "He's a young actor, and it's something many young actors could have problems with, but my understanding is that he had issues with drugs and alcohol, but he's okay now." Noah nodded his head and said, "Yeah, he's really good. I hope he stays healthy and makes a lot more movies. Something about him. He just seems like he's a good guy in real life." I smiled at him, loving his heart and how he saw things, and said goodnight to him. He was 12, and perhaps it's something older children stop doing eventually, and as parents, we move away from putting their children to bed as they grow. Prayers come to a halt, but Noah still said his, even then. My home office was in the spare room next to him, and I overheard, "And please bless Aunt Becky, Aunt Angie, Mackenzie, Justin, Levi, and Levada, Sammy and Jake, and all the dogs everywhere. And please, God, please bless Robert Downey Jr. Keep him healthy and strong and give him a good life." I got up and walked back in his room. I quietly asked, "Noah, did you just add Robert Downey Jr. to your prayers?" He said, "Yes, ma'am." Like it was the most normal thing in the world, and why would I ask about it? I shook my head, felt that gushing sensation of love wash over me from my son's heart once again, and said, "Okay, good night, Noe." Robert Downey Jr. was the closing name Noah said in his prayers every night for years. I don't honestly know if he ever stopped and just thought his prayers in his head as most people do. I'm quite serious when I write that the last time I happened to overhear him saying prayers aloud at night, he was 15, and he still included Mr. Downey. I have no idea why, other than perhaps it was habit. That, or he was earnestly that concerned about Mr. Downey's well-being that it warranted years of daily prayer and meditation. As I sat there beside his bed in hospital that morning, listening to all the machines hum, not knowing if he was breathing or it was just the respirator doing the job, remembering the years of "And God bless Robert Downey Jr." which, yes, the full name was said every single time, I felt crushed for some reason that the man never knew that this boy prayed for him every night. Not Iron Man, not a fictional character. Noah prayed for the man himself, for his life, for his health, for his joy, for his success, for his family. These were the words my child spoke over this man's life. Someone Noah would never likely meet, nor would ever know Noah Jeffries existed, and he wish-prayed that for him for years. How would anyone ever know how deep Noah's soul was, or how powerfully he loved, or how much good he was going to be in the world? He had to survive. He had to. How could those of us around him continue if he didn't? How was that even possible? Nothingness. Throughout the day on October 3rd, Bud and I stayed at Noah's side. At that time, it was just a waiting game as we were told different scenarios, possible surgeries, and long-term strategies. So many people came to the hospital. Some came back to his room in TICU, and others who couldn't bring themselves to see him in that state simply sat with us in the waiting room to support us and love our son. At no time during his stay was the waiting in TICU empty with support for Noah. Even when no one was permitted back but us, people still sat and waited. His jiu-jitsu family came with Sam Kimmel and Chris and Mary Runda, Derek and Belle Stansberry, taking up residency alongside us for whatever time they were able to be there. I love them for that. Chris also fell into the Tenorock FWC state management family, who showed as often as they could as well, among them Tom Graff, Jason Tackett, Amber Johns, and others whom I knew that I knew, but everything was just a blur in the face of fear. His Clay's family NSCA competitors, range owners, range employees, PCSO deputies, LPD officers, LFD and polk firefighters, EMTs. So many people came to tell him that they loved him. By that time, the intensive care section of the hospital was asking who he was that so many people came. I spent hours scrolling through contacts, seeing people's names who I knew would want to know. People who saw Noah as a friend, a brother, a son, a nephew, a grandson, and nearly every one of them showed up in person. I felt as if I had been holding my breath since 10 p.m. the previous night, waiting for a sign of life from Noah. A twitch, a murmur, something, anything. There was nothing. Just the artificial pump of the machines and that damn clock on the wall. 2 years later, I could still hear it as if I'm sitting there again. Hours dragged by, with people trying to bring us food to get us to eat and anything else they thought might be of some comfort. It was all so greatly appreciated, even though in those moments nothing would have helped except the sight of Noah's open and alert eyes. I kept touching his left hand, not understanding how hands that could be so strong and talented could possibly never work again. I wondered about his right hand and the damage done to it. If he recovered, would he still be able to play his instruments? That was his peace. When everything was closing in on him or he felt stressed, his instruments were where he found solace and calm. He even brought one with him when we would travel to different clays competitions around the state and country. There was a case in the trunk with an over-under shotgun as well as a case with a guitar. Noah played 9 instruments extremely well. It began when he was 8 years old. When Noah was 5, he experienced some motor skill problems after he had a negative reaction to a ketamine sedative given to him having his arm set when it was broken while playing. I had been reading about the success rate of motor skill recovery in the brain from learning to play music when Noah announced he would really like to learn to play guitar. He had a Toys R Us gift card and while perusing the aisles, found a white and black electric guitar to play. I called a local music shop that I knew well to ask about some references on guitar teachers. Enter Larry Perry. Noah began taking lessons from Mr. Perry every Wednesday when he was 9 years old on that Toys R Us guitar. Eventually, the lesson time doubled as Noah wanted to also learn acoustic guitar, bass, dobro, banjo, and mandolin. Noah took lessons for years until Mr. Perry went on tour in Europe. When he returned, Noah was older and employed, and he elected to go back, paying for the lessons himself. He loved it, and he greatly respected Mr. Perry. He taught himself harmonica, piano, and violin, though to him it was a fiddle. And now I sat looking at those hands, knowing what skill lay in them, and again, another facet of my son's amazing talents leveled me that they could be gone. His talents. There was never anything Noah tried to do that he did not do well. He would have argued that, quickly. He thought he was average and nothing special. It never mattered what it was that he wanted to try to do. If he didn't take to it naturally, he would work till he succeeded. My sister-in-law, Angie, brought in a flyer one day when Noah was 13 and said that an outdoor sporting group at her church was having a sporting clays charity competition. She wondered if Noah might like to do it, since he really enjoyed trick shooting with his Red Ryder BB gun. Yes, like the one Ralphie had in Christmas Story. With a compass in the stock and this thing which tells time. The competition was on a Saturday, 1 week away. Noah said, "Sure, I'll try it." I took him to Tenorock Range to the 5 stand on Wednesday and said, "Okay, see that machine out there? That's the trap. An orange clay is going to come shoot out of it when I push this button. Each machine will throw a clay at a different angle and speed. When you see the clay get to the point where it looks like it's in a sweet spot because it's slowed down and hung there for a second, shoot it." He asked, "That's it?" I said, "Yep, pretty much. You want to obliterate it. Don't forget, ones that are further out, you'll have to compensate for the distance. So figure out where the clay's sweet spot is and then shoot just ahead of it so the shot and the clay meet at the same time." He said, "All right, well, that sounds easy enough." I threw 50 clays that day. The kid hit 30 of them. I took him back the next day, and he hit 40. I told Bud about it, and he said, "I don't believe this." So he went with us on Friday, Noah hitting 45 out of the 50 clays thrown. We showed up Saturday morning for the charity event. Noah shooting with a pump shotgun. He won the youth division and placed second overall, one clay behind the high score. He was hooked. We went to every charity clays event we thought was affordable at Tenorock. That's where one Saturday Noah met Jack Martin, Mike Duncan, and Gary Cole. They had lost their fourth to make a team, and Noah was competing as an individual. We were shooting just ahead of them, and they were watching Noah level the course. Jack approached and asked, "Hey, son, we're missing our fourth. You want to squad with us?" They won the team event. Noah won youth, and later, Jack and Noah were winning the partner divisions as well. They were all retired, in their 70s, and Noah's best friends. I called them his second-hand lions. Loving that movie, Jack reminded me of Robert Duvall's character. Noah adored them and just referred to them as his old dudes. Noah's old dudes became a term everyone was well associated with, and anyone who ended up being classified as one knew it was meant to be a term of endearment and Noah's highest honor for the person's ability to impart wisdom, love, be skilled at something, and be a good human being. It wasn't a classification reserved for just men either. He had women grouped in there as well. The next person who recognized Noah's accuracy for clays was Captain Kevin Widener with the Polk Sheriff's Office. Kevin took Noah under his wing, introducing him to many deputies and officers, including Sheriff Judd and Ruben Garcia. He brought Noah on board to participate in charity events with the Sheriff's Department anytime he could, and Noah loved and appreciated it. Kevin, too, was one of Noah's old dudes. Over the next 5 years, Noah won multiple titles nationwide, quickly becoming recognized as a top clays competitor in the NSCA, National Sporting Clays Association. Florida State sub-junior consecutive years, Florida State junior consecutive years, Florida State men's open master at 17, Florida State team, Georgia State junior regionals, nationals, two-time All-American. Yet he thought he was Joe Schmo, and anyone could hit those targets if they just tried. He had made just such amazing friends through clays competitions. The Berardinelli family in particular. Joey, Hetty, Chris, and Simone. Chris and Noah, both junior competitors at the time, became good friends quickly, and Noah cherished their family. It always seemed Noah was blessed in the friendships that he forged. He was surrounded by true and good people at all times. Those hands, the reflexes, the hand-eye coordination, the ability to see moves 3 and 4 moves ahead, the speed, the Herculean strength. Strongman feats were literally child's play to him. Bud had Noah around world-renowned strength athletes his whole life. It was Bud's job and his interest. Noah just followed suit. He wanted to be as strong, if not stronger, than Dad. He thought the things they did were playtime fun. Bending nails with just your hands, like most people would bend a paperclip or a pipe cleaner, completely average, for certain. Noah was setting strength records at 12 years old doing old-time strongman feats. None of it was forced upon him or suggested. He just picked it up and did it because he thought it was fun, and that's all we wanted him to see it as. We felt if he thought physical fitness was just part of life and fun, then he would keep it as a normal part of his life always and have great health. We had no idea he would be one of the world's strength phenoms and referred to as a metahuman. Introduced to Dr. Terry Todd, one of the leading authorities on the history of strength and physical culture by Grandmaster Strongman Dennis Rogers, Noah was recognized by the Physical Culture Museum of Strength at the University of Texas in Austin at the age of 17, with a hand-bent piece of steel on display, which is still there today. And then there was jiu-jitsu. Bud began competing in UFC matches before Noah was born. It continued for years with him studying at dojos for different grappling martial arts, and Noah was always watching. Again, for him, It was just something he did that he deeply loved, but he had a knack for it, calculating moves his opponent would make and countering before they could make them. Ross Kellen, Roger Kessler, Sam Kimmel, and the Gracie Bard styles shaped Noah's skills and love for the art. His physical strength and grip partnered well with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and at 15, while at a national competition having won the team heavyweight division, he was now in contention for the Open with grown men in his class. He was sparring for second and third. He won his match, and now in the final for the title, or second place. As their match ensued and lasted, the man who had lost to Noah in the previous match called out, coaching to the man now sparring with Noah. They were members of the same dojo. He yelled out above the crowd, "Don't let him get hold of your gi. He has hands of death." Jiu-jitsu is where Noah formed some of his closest friendships. These were the people who now sat vigil with us, trying to keep our spirits up, hiding their fears from our sight, though we saw their heartbreak for their brother. A glimmer of hope. Bud and I stayed by Noah's side in the TICU room, sleeping, sitting upright in chairs, as visitors were not supposed to stay in the room, but we refused to leave. We sat, napping intermittently, when we could no longer stay awake, leaning against each other. Over the course of the day, on Tuesday the 3rd, the doctors had said it seemed to them one of his pupils was becoming fixed and changing shape. They were now sending him for more CAT scans and concerned about brain swelling. We were told there was still a chance, as the swelling could come back down again. All we could do was wait. I was beginning to hate that word. It was around 12:15 a.m. Wednesday, October 4th, when it was once again just the two of us in Noah's room. Everyone else had gone home for the night. We were not talking, just listening to Noah breathe. I walked over to Noah's bed. We had kept our chairs and belongings off to the side of the room, as far out of the way from the doctors and nurses as possible. I took his left hand once again and was talking to him, telling him how much I loved him and that everything was going to be okay. I said, "I wish there was a way you could answer me." And suddenly his hand squeezed mine. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought it had to have been an involuntary muscle response, just a twitch. I leaned in a bit closer to his face and spoke softly. "Noah, can you hear me?" He squeezed my hand again. I leaned back away from the bed, still holding his hand. I felt a sense of relief and then wouldn't let myself get worked up, telling myself this could easily just be a muscular tic. I looked over my shoulder at Bud and said quietly, "Honey, he just squeezed my hand. I asked him if he could hear me, and then he squeezed my hand again." Bud got up and walked towards us, asking, "He did what?" "Okay, big test." I leaned back down to him and said, "Noe, baby, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand twice for yes." There was a moment while it seemed like everything in the room stopped, and then Noah squeezed my hand 2 times. I was in shock. I said, "Noe, let's do this. Once for no, twice for yes. Are you in pain anywhere?" 1 squeeze. I asked, "Do you know everyone has been here and Dana has been here the whole time?" 2 squeezes. I asked, "Do you know how much we love you?" 2 squeezes. I felt the most amazing sensation of relief and hope wash over me. He was there. He could hear us. There was a chance. I suddenly felt exhausted, like I was feeling the weight of the 32 odd hours all at once, as if my legs just wanted to give out. I said to him, "Okay, buddy, I'm going to sit back down where Dad is, okay? We're not leaving the room. We are right here. We're not going to go anywhere. You are not alone. We're only about 7 feet away to your left. I'm going to go sit over there for just a little bit." And he tightened his grip dramatically. It felt like an imploring, "Don't go." Bud got one of the chairs so I could sit by his bed and keep holding his hand. I said, "Okay, I'll stay." After a while, his grip loosened. The nurse came back in to check his stats and do his once-over. The only way for her to do everything was if I moved back out of the way, so I quickly moved back my chair to where Bud was seated. I felt so relieved and invigorated. I mentioned to the nurse about the responsiveness, to which she said, "That's interesting, and not to discourage you, but it was most likely just normal involuntary muscle twitching." It didn't matter. It wasn't what I felt about it, but there was no point in arguing, and I could understand their medical perspective and experience. Nonetheless, I suddenly felt like I could rest just a bit and began to nod off. It was almost 2 a.m. At 4 a.m., I was jolted awake by the sound of an alarm on one of the machines and the sudden sense of someone rushing about in the room. We both sat up. "What's going on?" we asked in unison. For no apparent reason, his levels began changing quickly. We had been educated as to which numbers meant what on the displays and what each thing was monitoring. We were told the numbers they did not want to see come up, and suddenly we were closing in on those brackets. Nurse after nurse came in the room. The doctor on shift was monitoring, and they were pushing one drug after another, trying to get his numbers to level off. One drug would fix a level, but it would drop or agitate something else being monitored. They'd push another drug to stop that one, which would impact yet another. By 5:30 a.m., they decided to push meds to put Noah into a medically induced coma in an attempt to get his body to shut down completely so his brain could relax enough to hopefully reduce the swelling. Love. It was late morning, around 11 a.m., when the neurosurgeon sat with Bud and I in the tiny consultation room, telling us that suddenly Noah's brain was swelling, and they were sending him for another CAT scan to check blood flow and response. But it didn't look good. His exact words were, "If you have anyone out of town or locally who hasn't seen him and wants to, call them and tell them to come now." We walked out of the consultation room and asked for a second opinion and to see the chief of neurosurgery. He assured us that absolutely no ruling would be made until several doctors all agreed to the same conclusion. My world started spiraling from that point. I kept thinking about Dana. So sweet, so beautiful, so full of hope and promise. Never leaving his side, with all his injuries, his head now shaved to stubble, tubes and gauze everywhere, and every bone broken in his face. She still spoke to him like they were having a conversation, calling him handsome, as though it were his given name. I love her so much. No mother could ask for a better match for her son. I was and am so grateful that my son knew that love. Very few people seem to get to experience it, but he did, and what an extraordinary gift to have been blessed with for so young. My heart broke for her, I think more so than it did for me. I walked back into Noah's room alone and sat beside him with my hand in his. The readings had changed on his monitors to the numbers they said they didn't want to see. The sound of the oxygen machine sucked in and out, breathing for him. The pumps administering doses of different medications hummed and buzzed beside me. I could hear muffled voices on the other side of the door, speaking indiscernible words. Last moments. These are my last moments with you. That was all I could think. I sobbed. I was trying so hard not to cry in front of anyone, but now I was alone, just me and him, and I was broken. This boy was my whole life. He was everything that mattered to me, and the sole reason why I did anything. He was my whole heart. What was the last thing he said? What was the last thing I said to him that I know he heard? And I thought about the phone call with him before his accident. Timestamp 7:38 p.m., October 2nd, 2017. The phone call lasts 47 seconds. 47 seconds. Doesn't seem like much, does it? And it went like this. Noah said, "Hey, Ma, if it wouldn't hurt anyone's feelings, I'm going to go over to Dana's grandmother's house, okay? I want to see her Uncle Jay before he leaves for Tennessee, and I want to go see her tonight, too. I said, yeah, it's okay. No one will mind. I understand. I know you got to see her. Noah said, yeah. Okay, you sure no one will mind? I said, yeah, I'm sure. Have fun. I'll see you later. Noah said, thanks, Ma. You know, I really do love her so much. And I answered laughing, said, yeah, I'm fully aware, son. I love you so much, Snoop. He said, love you too, Ma. That was it. Call ended. Love. That was the last thing he said. It was the last thing I said. And it was the last thing he said and thought about Dana. Love. He was hit by the other vehicle a few minutes later. And I asked aloud, what do you want me to do, Noe? What if this is it? And then I thought back to spring of 2016. In the beginning of 2016, Noah and Dana put in their applications for the summer rotation at Yellowstone National Park. They were both excited about it, the adventure and the experiences that they hoped to share. And then one evening in April, Noah sat with me in the living room watching a movie when he said, hey, Ma, I need to ask you a question. I really don't know anything about rings and the quality of one other than the size, so could you explain some of it to me or tell me where to go so I'm not getting snowed? I glanced over at him and trying not to show the reaction I was having inside, I asked tentatively, what kind of ring are we talking about here? Noah could be like a skittish horse hearing a car backfire when it came to overly sentimental emotions and reactions. Too much gushing and he'd abandon both the conversation and the room. Without moving his eyes from the television screen, he answered, an engagement ring. I exhaled slowly and began explaining to him cut, clarity, and carat, places to go, options to be had, metal types, and so forth. I asked, has Dana ever told you what she might like, or are you interested in an heirloom ring? He said, yeah, she told me what she likes and what she would want. I just need to figure out where to get it, the one that's perfect for her and her ring size and how to pay for it. See, here's what I'm thinking. If I can get it picked out now before we leave, I can make payments on it over the summer, then have it shipped out to me in Yellowstone. Our anniversary is October 15th. That should be about our last weekend there. I figure by then we'll have a spot, like a summit, an area, or something that we go to that's special to us. I thought we could ride horseback up to the spot and then camp there for the evening, and I can propose to her on that mountain under those stars with that ring. You're killing me, kid. No, he's not romantic at all. Still trying to keep control of my overwhelming desire to exclaim, oh, Noah, that's so beautiful. I calmly responded with, that sounds really beautiful. She'll probably love it. You don't have to have the ring paid off to have it. You could put it on a credit card, or the store will probably have credit terms. You could take it with you when you go. He quickly balked. No, I don't like credit. I want to have it paid in full. I don't want to just go to one of these cookie cutter stores where someone else could have possibly bought the same ring. I want it designed special for her. She's one of a kind. Her ring should be too. It's the promise of our lives together. I don't want it to be like anyone else's. It should be extraordinary and perfect for her. I gave him some suggestions of stores in the area that do custom designs, and then he asked if I would go with him the day he picked it out. He wanted me there to make sure he wasn't being overcharged or to ask questions he may not think of, but the ring was all him and what he believed fit Dana's wishes. On May 3rd, 2 days before they were to head out to Yellowstone, we went ring shopping. He found a place that would work with him and picked out a stone he felt was everything she had said she wanted. 2 hours later, we exited the shop with him having put the down payment on the ring. He walked to the end of the sidewalk and leaned over the grass. He was bent at the waist and taking deep breaths. I patted him on the back and while laughing asked, are you okay? Between breaths he answered, just put a down payment on an engagement ring. I think I'm going to throw up. That's like a permanent, forever kind of moment. Forever. That's how he saw it. That's how he believed marriage should be approached and revered. He was never looking for Miss Right Now. When he was 16, he used to watch Bud and I and the way we worked together and the way that we talked, worked things out, laughed, and loved. He would sometimes worry and ask, what if I never find that? What if everyone I meet just doesn't come close to that? How can I choose to be with someone if our relationship isn't like that? And I'm walking around knowing that's what's possible and exists, but I don't have it. I would tell him not to worry. He would know when he found the right one. It may be soon, or it may be when he was 40 or more, but he would know. Then enter Dana. Dana. They met at work when she was doing volunteer hours at Tenorock in the pro shop. Noah came home the first day she had been there, and the first thing he said was, Mom, I met the most beautiful girl today. She is incredible. And then they had their first date, which wasn't so much a date as it was two coworkers going to dinner after they closed up, but in truth, it was still a date. Noah rarely ever stayed out past 11 p.m. without sending me a text just to give me a heads up, so I wouldn't worry about him. And that night, nothing. Radio silence. It kept getting later and later into early morning hours, and our phone plan has a GPS locator, which I used that evening. His phone kept showing him sitting in an Olive Garden parking lot. I couldn't decide if he lost his phone there or he had binged on the all-you-can-eat salad and breadsticks and was incapacitated, unable to drive. He texted around 1:30 a.m. and said, So sorry, I'll be home soon, no worries. When he came in, all he said was, I found her, Ma. I found the one. After they shut down the Olive Garden, they sat on the tailgate of his truck talking for hours, reluctant to leave each other's company. So, the summer passed in Yellowstone, and he made his payments on time. As a state employee with FWC, he had a pension plan. When he took his leave of absence to go to Yellowstone, he cashed it out and put it in his savings account with the intention of holding it for the summer to make sure he could pay for any emergency situations, but hopefully to use it to pay off the ring and have it sent out to him. Then her Jeep, the vehicle in which they drove out there, had a mechanical issue that needed repair. Noah said he didn't think it was right to ask Dana's dad or us to pay for the repair when it was their idea to go out there. He felt they should be the ones to pay for it. So he used the pension money. October was coming quickly, and the week before their anniversary weekend, I called and asked him if he wanted me to go pick up the ring and ship it out. My parents had even offered to pay the balance so he could have his proposal weekend. Noah declined. He said, No, thank you, though. I really appreciate it, but I've given this a lot of thought, and I wanted to ask her dad permission first. I know that's old school, but I think both she and he would appreciate it. I also don't think I should do that over the phone. I want to marry the man's daughter. I should ask him looking eye to eye. Also, I don't want to propose to her with a ring that has a debt attached to it. When I give her the ring, I want it to be mine to give, promising her a strong future together, not a promise of debt. I'll come home, keep paying it off, and I'll figure out something else, some other amazing way to propose. They came home at the beginning of November in 2016. 1 month later, Bud's dad, Noah's papa, passed away, and Noah was devastated. He wasn't in a place or a mood to think about proposing, so he kept working and making his payments and planning their future. When I would ask about it, he would say, Soon, but I have to make sure I'm a good enough man for her. I need to have everything in place so she knows I'll always make sure everything is okay. And then one day in spring, he walked in the house with a gift bag from the jewelry shop and said, Done. It's paid for. It's now mine to give. Would you please hide this in your room for me till I can plan the perfect way for her? I put the bag, unopened, on a shelf in my nightstand, and there it sat till that morning, Wednesday, October 4th, 2017. I was looking at my son's still beautiful face, asking, What do you want me to do, Noe? What if this is it? What if the test comes back and confirms their suspicions? I mean, I'm praying it doesn't, but What if it does? What if this is all Dana has? Is this how it ends? She's never going to know any moment with you here as her fiancé. She'll never get to wear that ring you obsessed over with you still breathing and present and be able to touch you. She'll know you planned to, but it just seems like too little too late. What do you want me to do? I felt it resonate in me like he was now standing beside me saying, go. I left the hospital and drove home at Mach speed to get the ring. I shoved the box in my pocket and sped back to the hospital. I would only take it out if it was the worst case scenario. The test came back and it was just that. The neurosurgeon called us into the tiny room yet again. My parents elected to stay in with Noah. Bud's mom, Angie, Justin, Levada, and Mackenzie all followed in behind us. We stood there as the doctor and two others explained there was no brain activity whatsoever, no blood flow at all, and Noah was gone. I could hear everyone in the room beginning to gasp and sob, but my mind was racing for possibilities and variances. I was asking questions. What about this? What about that? What about when? Essentially, is there any chance at all you're wrong and this can still change? You don't know him. He's a fighter. This can't be right. I heard my mother-in-law say, someone needs to call Becky. Bud's other sister was also in a holding pattern, waiting for news, which I cannot imagine how excruciating that was for her. She is all about family and being there for those she loves. Both of Noah's aunts were more like mothers to him. It's just the way we were. She needed to be called as soon as possible so she could make arrangements to get to Lakeland. I quickly said I would do it. My boy, I'll do it. And I needed to get out of that room. I asked Justin for his phone, having left mine on the charger in Noah's room. I found an empty corridor outside of the TICU unit and called my sister-in-law to tell her the devastating news. It is the worst call you can possibly have to make. I feel awful for ER nurses, doctors, and police officers who have to do this so often. Saying it aloud to her suddenly made it too real. Bud found me, and we stood in the empty corner, not making a sound, just holding each other. There was nothing left. This was it. The bottom of the depths of terror, where all the darkest what-ifs dwell that are too horrible to speak of. We were at impact point from a free fall off the side of the cliff, and we were still holding each other because there was nothing else to stop the pain from the jagged shards the death of your child leaves behind. I walked back into the TICU unit through the main waiting room door, as it was the only entrance back in for visitors. Was I still a visitor? By that time, I felt like we had established the law of eminent domain, and I should have been issued one of those scannable medical staff ID cards that read Noah's mom. I walked in and stood silent and still. The entire room was packed, elbow to elbow, with droves of friends and extended family. Everyone turned, shocked to see me walk through that exterior doorway. You could have heard an airsoft pellet hit the floor. I thought to myself, oh no. Oh God, I have to say it again. To the room, to the whole room, to all of them. I have to break all of their hearts. I was so angry. What the hell was going on? This was impossible. Not Noah. This was not what was supposed to happen. He was the epic hero of the tale. He was not supposed to die. Not now. Not here. Not like this. They're all still staring at me. I have to say something. I heard the words coming out of my mouth like a robotic statement. Inside of my head, all I was thinking was, I hate crying in front of people. Don't cry. Don't cry. Don't gasp. For the love of God, please don't throw up. Please don't make me have to do this again. I finished what I was saying, and people moved towards me to hug me. I quickly backed away to the entrance door, saying, I'm sorry, I have to go back in. The truth was, it was an escape, because my brain was thinking, don't hug me. Please don't touch me. I can't do this if anyone touches me. I stood at the door, buzzing repeatedly. God, please make someone open this door. Yes, came through the crackling speaker. I said, I'm Noah's mom. By that time, the staff of the TICU and most of the ICU unit knew who Noah was from the army of people camped out at the end of the hallway. Somewhere around Tuesday afternoon, I think Lakeland Regional had conceded to the fact that we were going to overthrow the administration and had set up our encampment in the TICU waiting area. The door buzzed and the lock popped. I quickly pulled it open, never so happy to be on the other side of that door, back with my son and away from everyone staring at me, not knowing what to say to comfort me. Then suddenly, there they were, walking out of his room. My parents. Now my brain is thinking, I can't do this. I can't say this to them. Not to them. They loved him so much. He was everything to them. He was the golden one and their only grandchild. Everyone had been out of Noah's room, making calls, sending texts, crying in empty corners. No one had been back in his room. My parents didn't know yet. My mother just stood there looking at me. I couldn't even make the words come out of my mouth. I just shook my head no. My mom gasped a few times and demanded no. No! She looked like she was going to collapse, and my father caught her standing by her side. But he himself looked like his world just ended, and he was left standing in the dusty aftermath alone. I did not know what else to say, but I'm so sorry. Just past my parents' shoulders, I could see Dana still standing by Noah, next to his bed. Her parents were there as well. I thought, Jesus, please, no, I can't say this to this beautiful, hopeful girl. Walked up to her with tears streaming down her face. She said, he's going to be okay, right? I just know he is. Again, all I could do was shake my head. No. She turned to her father, burying her face in his chest as they all started crying. I felt like the angel of death. I was systematically destroying the dreams and joy of an entire community in one fell swoop. I stood there, watching her cry, my hand on her back in some empty attempt to comfort what I knew could not be soothed or righted. I turned to walk out of the room to figure out what was next. Someone made a comment about how stalwart and calm Bud and I were through the entire ordeal, from the first phone call to the final moments. I think it's because we decided quite some time ago that we would never take bad news as the final decision of how we would react. Yes, sometimes the absolute worst does happen, but until that moment, something could change. Falling apart before the bell was just never an option for us. Our son would need us if he survived, would have to be a source of strength. If he didn't, having stood strong during the storm helps you keep going in the aftermath. It's who we had to be for Noah, birth to death. We were told by the chief of neurosurgery that it would take a few hours for the final ruling. Different doctors must administer different tests every hour, concluding with him giving the final exam and decision. If he agreed, then Noah would be declared brain dead within hours. So hang on a minute. You mean you just had me go around and tell everyone he's gone and he won't make it, but that's not actually technically it yet? Are you kidding me right now? The doctor explained, this is the way this is done. It's the best way we have of conclusive agreement. Do you understand what brain death really means? He wasn't being sarcastic or cruel. He was genuine in making sure I truly grasped this as a lay person, but yes, I fully understood it. It just would have been kinder for my mind, heart, and soul if Noah's body would have just stopped all on its own. Yet, again, that wasn't Noah. He wouldn't quit, not even in this moment. He's the fighter who won't be TKO'd. He'll go the full bout and let it go to a judge's decision if his opponent was that strong to be able to withstand him, but he's going to go the distance. I leaned over at the waist to get a breath, feeling like I myself was the one in the ring. Wasn't that the bell? Where was the damn stool anyway? When I bent over, I felt the box holding Dana's ring in my pocket. I didn't know how much longer we had. This was the last good thing I could do for my son and Dana. This was the last part of him I had to give to her. It was the only thing I could think of to do so she would always know we saw her as our daughter-in-law and we loved her like our own, though we honored his choice and we believed in them both. It was all I could give her, his promise of love, always and forever. I asked Bud to find her family and to bring them all in Noah's room with her. We stood on one side of the bed and she on the other. I began to fill in the backstory of Noah's plans and everything that happened, what he wanted to do, what she meant to him, and his need to feel he was worthy, and his desire for a promise of a strong future together. Then I asked her father's permission on behalf of our son. I took the little box out of my pocket, passed it over top of Noah, and asked Dana if she would accept it as Noah's promise of his love for her. I hoped and prayed no one would be offended or think it wrong, but it just felt like the right thing to do for Noah and her. Neither of us expected her to wear it, but just have it and know his intention. She put it on immediately, crying, saying, "Yes, of course, yes." In true Noah form, the ring was a perfect fit. We all left the room, leaving Dana alone with him. As I walked out, I felt I had done the right thing. If the doctors were right and he didn't recover, she would at least have had that time with him, knowing the truth and the depth of what he felt for her. And if he did recover, I knew, eventually, he would understand. Time of death, 4:30 p.m. As the hours passed, different doctors entered Noah's room, poking and prodding at him. They had stopped checking his monitors as frequently, and I was no longer asked to move my chair as I sat by his side after refusing to leave the room during the exams to determine brain death. I wasn't going to take anyone's word for it. I wanted to see his responsiveness for myself. I didn't care what they had to do in these exams. I wasn't going anywhere, come hell or high water. I spent the time reading through numerous medical articles on brain death, the conclusiveness, and searching for any documented cases where someone had made a near 100% recovery after the fact. I could find none. About a week after Hurricane Irma had come through, I was watching a TV program, a medical drama, when Noah comes walking through the room, catches a portion of the dialogue, then comes through the room again a few minutes later. The scene was focused around a patient who was being kept alive on life support, though they were completely brain dead. The doctor was telling the family there was no chance of full recovery, and in this case, the person would be in a comatose state till someone elected to disconnect the machines. Noah, who never raised his voice to me once in all of our years together, suddenly whips around and exclaims, "Let me tell you what. If that ever happens to me, you damn well better let me go. If you love me, don't you dare do that to me. Don't you keep me locked in that kind of a prison, knowing the kind of person I was and what I wanted from my life. Don't do that to me just to keep me here with you. Please." I was stunned by his irrational response to a fictitious medical drama, stunned that he spoke to me like that, stunned that he was adamant about something that has such a ridiculously low statistical chance of happening. I said, somewhat disjointed, Okay. Okay, Noah. It's just a TV show. I gotcha. You made your point." He took a deep breath and looked like he was coming back to himself and realizing the reaction he had just had and how completely out of character it was. "I'm sorry. I don't know why. That just bothered me so much. And I'm sorry I freaked out on you. That just really messed with my head for some reason." And now, weeks later, here we were, in that ridiculously low statistical chance of happening. I was watching them hour by hour decide that you were brain dead, and there was nothing we could do to stop it, aside from doing exactly what you asked us not to do. I was holding your left hand seated by your side because I still refused to leave the room while the chief of neurosurgery did the final exam of you. Your long, gentle fingers were wrapped around mine, calloused and a bit rough from the years of playing guitars and banjos, working outdoors on equipment and learning to bend thick steel like it was a rubber band. I was very aware of the span of your palm, like a catcher's mitt, and how much larger it was than mine. And I don't think I ever really noticed that before that day. I stroked the skin of your hands, thinking of all the extraordinary things they could do. The amount of skill, dexterity, strength, and tenderness that lived in them was phenomenal. And I was baffled why all of this talent and greatness would be placed into one human being only to be taken just past your 21st birthday. As I sat listening to the machines buzz, click, and whir, while medical staff moved politely around me, trying not to ask me to move. I barely heard their voices, and I saw what they were doing, but I was entranced in you, in your life. I guess I always have been. I always had tunnel vision when it came to you. There was no one else as important, as worthy of every breath I had to give in this life. I didn't care what you did as a career, just that you did what you loved and that you were passionate about it. I would have searched the ends of the earth to find you the best mentors, no matter what you chose. You were so amazing to me. I needed to give you the absolute best pieces of myself that I had to share with anyone. You were my opus to leave in this world, not to be a mirror or a marker of my existence, but the constant awareness that this human being who was born of me was my responsibility, gift, and joy to raise, inspire, and motivate to being a man who could do great good in the world, no matter what he chose. Someone who could be brave when others run, think clearly and quickly in the face of turmoil, move proverbial mountains, love deeply, care for others greatly, putting them first, and see each person for who they were, unjudged and accepted unless they proved otherwise. Someone who knew his strengths but never used them against others. Someone who had compassion without end and a sense of humor that filled a room with joy. Someone who could give to the world around him all the best that a human being has to offer others. Now, granted, you made the task easy, and for the most part the dance was effortless just by your nature. But I just felt so honored to have been the one who got to say that you were my son. How could this incredible human being be at his end? And then I heard it. The only thing I heard clearly while my thoughts poured over our lives together, straining so desperately hard to remember every single wrinkle of the tapestry that was your journey with me. Time of death, 4:30 p.m. It was like a sonic boom went off inside me. My mind was screaming, no, 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 you take that back. You take it back. Jesus, oh God, please make him take it back. I'm still holding his hand. He's right here. He's not gone. He is not gone. This isn't real. This isn't happening. They said their apologies and condolences and quickly, quietly exited the room. The sound of the machines did not change. The clock ticked on the wall, and the rest of the room was silent. It was just the two of us, your hand still in mine, and I remembered intricately how tiny it was the first time I touched it on July 11th, 21 years before that, just 3 floors up from where I sat now. At 4:40, your regular nurse walked in the room, and without making much eye contact with me, out of sympathy, she gently and compassionately asked if I knew what your choices were about being an organ donor. Without hesitation, my memory snapped back to your 16th birthday at the DMV and the clerk asking if you wanted to be an organ donor. You looked at me and asked, "Do I?" And I remember laughing a bit and saying, "That's your body. You make that decision for yourself, but I do think that's the right thing to do." You said, "Well, so basically it means if something happens to me and I die, someone else might get to live, right?" I said, "Yep." You said, "Well, that seems like an obvious choice. That is the right thing to do." And you checked yes for being an organ donor. I said to the nurse, "Yes, actually, I know exactly what he thought about it. I was there. I was there. For the whole show, birth to death. I had a front row seat to the incredible, never dull, spectacular, spontaneous, epic, wild journey you made into your life with side-splitting laughter, love, passion, toughness, strength, courage, and adventure. By 6:30, your dad and I were back in the bad room, as we came to know it. The TICU's private consultation broom closet with metal folding chairs and a 1960s-looking wall desk. It comfortably fit 3 adults who could share a thin-sliced cucumber sandwich if the crusts were cut off. It's where we were taken every time they had to tell us something devastating over the previous 41 hours. And there we sat again, but this time with a lifelink organ donor coordinator. He handed me a stack of forms and then kindly asked, "And what will Noah be giving today?" I think it was the first time since 9:45 p.m. on Monday, October 2nd, that I smiled. There was something about it that just made me laugh because it made me remember the meaning of your name and why it had been chosen for you. Noah, peace, the bringer of peace. For me, there was nothing greater, and every minute I had to spend with you in those 21 years, that was how I felt when I was with you. There was such relief and acceptance and assurance in that moment as I laughed through tears and answered, "Noah brings peace." I realized that even in his death, he was doing it again, bringing peace to those people who now might have a second chance at life with their loved ones, to live their dreams, raise their children, love more, live longer, and have more time. It was a moment of serenity that even at the instance of my own greatest loss and devastation, there was still hope, and Noah was still being Noah, unselfish, giving, loving, respectful, and kind, being the strength that was unmatched, undominated, and with a grip that will never let go of the love he had and still has for all of us, friend, family, or stranger. In the words of my son, "I gotcha," which was his go-to phrase for understanding and having you covered and safe within his protection. The part about organ donation no one tells you. It had never occurred to me as the organ donor family that there was a window of time between when the paperwork is signed and when your loved one is actually taken to surgery in a case like ours. When you see it on TV, it's all very rushed and instantaneous, but in our situation, we were honoring Noah's wishes and they had to find recipient matches, which takes time. They have to match an extraordinary number of biological points from donor to recipient, and each organ is different as to how many matches there need to be. We were told it would be 24 to 48 hours before Noah would be physically taken from us. This is utterly surreal. You're sitting there with your person, hearing the respirator breathe for them, but after a while you begin to understand and become accustomed to the sound and feel like they are the ones doing the breathing, but they're not. We had time to sit and run through all of the never will be's. I sat watching Bud I felt so guilty. All I could do was tell him I was so sorry because even though it was happening to me too, and this was my reality as well, I kept thinking, oh my God, his only son, his only child's gone. He'll never have grandchildren or great grandchildren. He'll never hear a child call him Papa like his dad was called. The Jeffries name on his side ends with him. I was the reason we didn't have any other children. I couldn't. My body wouldn't carry to term. Even Noah was a miracle. Having had a relatively uneventful pregnancy, then all of a sudden developing toxemia and preeclampsia and finding out the placenta had detached. They weren't sure when. And Noah wasn't receiving any nutrients. He was delivered prematurely by emergency C-section after 36 hours of useless induced labor after he flatlined. Yet he fought his way back and was the light of our lives for 21 years. There was a moment when only the women were in the room. My mom, Bud's mom, Angie, Becky, Dana, her mom, a nurse, and I seem to recall the presence of a few other women, but they were all behind me as I sat with a chair on Noah's left side facing him, not wanting to stop touching his hand. Dana was seated on his right with her mom. She said something to me, but with the last word of her sentence, she called me Ma. I whipped my head around to her and I asked, what did you call me? It was hearing that word, that name, that it suddenly became concrete and real, and I burst into sobbing tears for the first time in front of anyone else. Oh my God, I'll never hear that again. No one will ever call me Mom again. I'll never be anyone's mother ever again. It was the one thing I loved the most, being his mother, and suddenly it was all just gone. He was so amazing, wonderful, loving, kind, powerful, strong, smart, and funny. How could he just be gone? Gone from us, gone from the world, and somehow, worse yet, the world would never know what they missed. The hours ticked by with as many people coming in to love on him as we were allowed to pack in the room. Then the LifeLink coordinator came in and announced that they had found matches. They were scheduling surgery for 2 a.m. Friday morning, October 6th. There was yet another sonic boom in my head. Now, they were really going to take him from me. At least here in this room, I still had him. I could still touch him, speak to him, lean in to lightly kiss his cheek, catching the smell of his skin that still smelled like he did as a child. He was still my boy, here in the flesh, and all of that was about to come to an end, and we would have to face the reality that he was truly gone. It was around 8 p.m. on Thursday night, the 5th. It seemed like the hours were moving entirely too fast now. I was running out of time, and I had no idea how I was supposed to just stand there and let them wheel him out and away from us forever. I was sickened by the thought of it. The LifeLink coordinator entered the room and said, everything is scheduled and we're good to go for 2 a.m. And she stood there for a moment looking at my face and I guess my facial expression. She cautiously said, or we could postpone it a little more if we need more time and aren't ready. My mind raced. Wait, this is an option? I can keep him a little longer. How much longer? Hours? Days? I opened my mouth to speak, but looked back over my shoulder at Noah. Even the room felt different than it had on Wednesday. On Tuesday, it felt like Noah was in the room, in the bed. But on Thursday, it was different. The room was different. I could feel Noah, but it was more around me than in the bed in front of me. It's the best way I can describe it. I thought about some doctors who had stopped me in the hallway earlier in the day to say what a good thing it was that we had honored Noah's wishes with organ donation. I had talked with them for a few minutes, and they had mentioned how critical all the timing is during the procedure because the longer someone is on life support, the less healthy the organs become, even in a short period of time. It's crucial that the recipients receive the healthiest organ possible for the best chances of recovery and to avoid rejection. What happens to Noah's recipients if we postpone it? How critical are they in their need? Are they themselves in ICU awaiting transplants? I mean, do they have families sitting by their beds, holding their hands, desperately praying for a donor? What if they have a young child who still needs them? What if they're the same age as Noah and their parents are sitting, pleading for their life to have more time with their son or daughter? What if they were here in front of me? How could I look into another mother's eyes and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to risk your child's life so I could spend another day with my son, who is actually already gone? I looked at Bud, who was staring at me. I smiled at him and thought of my son, who he had been, the young man who would lay his life down for another to protect and help them. I could hear his voice. Ma, what are you doing? Come on, look up. Don't look at the bed. I'm not there. I'm here. I'm around you. I'm part of you. Just let go. It's going to be okay. I nodded my head at Bud, who, without saying a word, smiled at me and nodded back. I turned back to the coordinator and said, No, it's okay. Keep it as scheduled. My son, the man I knew to be my son, he's already gone, but those people waiting, they still have a chance. The less time they have to wait, the better their chances of recovery. No one can do anything to reverse this or save my son. But for those people, he can still save them. Well, him and their doctors. She stood there for a second looking emotional and then asked, Can I just hug you right now? I was confused. Sure. Then I realized what I had said. I realized I was confirming his departure time, and I felt alone. The sensation of feeling like I was falling started again, but I was most definitely seated. This is really going to happen. They're really going to take him. And then I thought of his recipients again, and I suddenly felt connected to strangers who I earnestly hoped and prayed would have strong recoveries and continue healthy lives for years. Noah had been so physically gifted. I prayed that those cells and tissues would continue to thrive in the same way in his recipients for their sake. Then it was like there would still be a piece of Noah somewhere here on earth with us, even if we never had the chance to meet the people. I needed to say something publicly to Noah, to the universe, to parents, to those possibly sitting somewhere in a similar situation and feeling so alone with all these thoughts. I needed the world to know this amazing human being was leaving us, but his strength of character and spirit was still present and thriving, if for no one other than just us. Seated by his side, I opened my phone and began to write a public post. In surreal moments, we find clarity. My son entered my world at 12:16 a.m. on July 11th, 1996. Every minute that he lived, every smile he gave, every skill he shared, every joke he quickly cracked, and every failure he worked to turn into a success, he taught me by example the person I wanted to be for him. I know it's supposed to be the other way around. I teach him how to be strong, successful, joyful, and generous, but my son, My son taught with every gesture and intent that to be his mother, I would need to step up my game. It was a dance that, in truth, he choreographed without ever realizing that I was striving to keep up with his steps of character, kindness, commitment, and drive. He was humble, kind, and loving. He was stubborn, sarcastic, and a smartass. He was a riot, had depth of emotion that challenged the oceans, and was brilliant. He could figure out anything and knew how to work. Not work for the sake of finishing a task, but work because he found the joy in effort and then success. My son's desire was to work for the good, be helpful, support and respect others, driving always to be what he deemed was a good man. He knew victory, he knew failure, he knew pain, he knew love, and he knew what he wanted and who he wanted to be. My son left this world at 4:30 p.m. on October 4th, 2017 at 21 years of age, declared dead but kept on life support because he wanted to be an organ donor. As of the time of this writing, I have 4 hours left with the person I recognize as my son. Before he is taken to surgery to life flight, so far, his heart, liver, both kidneys, and pancreas to already found recipient matches. My world is shattered, and I am terrified. I am terrified to wake up in the morning knowing his voice is gone from my home. There will be no more 6:30 a.m. coffees together, no more, "Hey Ma, how was your day?" No more thoughtful gestures just because, or that amazing smile and laugh that made everything worthwhile. But his donation means that someone else will continue to have those days of their favorite moments with those they love. And again, he continues to teach me. Even in these last moments, he pushes me to dig down deep and find the strength I did not know I had to focus on those people and what difference it will make for them. There is nothing that can be done to save my beautiful son, but he can still do something for them. Lahey-Jeffries, you are my whole heart, every good part of me. I have been so honored to share this time and space with you as your mother and friend. I'll see you on the other side. Noah's Army. It was nearing 2 a.m. Moments. We only had moments left with him. Noah's room was a nucleus with just the 5 of us in it for some time. Noah, myself, Bud, Justin, and Dana. We reminisced. We actually laughed over memories. I wanted those last moments of Noah's physical body to be surrounded by positivity, love, and laughter. I needed as much good to be left around him as could be. All the strength we could muster for him, to honor him, to remember him, and to lift him up. The hallways were all of a buzz, but I didn't know why. I knew that friends and family had said they would come back up to be with us as Noah was moved from TICU down the hallway to the surgical unit. The staff at LRMC in that section of the hospital all seemed to be talking about something, but I was oblivious to it till it was time to move Noah. I stepped out of his room into the first hallway, which was still inside the TICU unit, and only had our immediate family and closest friends standing inside. After a few minutes, the medical staff pushed Noah's bed out of the room, down the hallway, and we all followed behind them. As the automatic doors opened into the public access hallway, my eyes became transfixed on the army of people lining both sides of the hallway for Noah to be rolled past. Law enforcement officers from both Polk County Sheriff's Department and Lakeland Police Department stood in uniform, as they do for a fallen officer killed in the line of duty. Florida Wildlife Commission officers and co-workers stood in uniform alongside them, and so many friends, neighbors, relatives, and even people who had only come to know him recently all lined the hallways to give our son a public honor guard escort. on his last journey on this earth. They stood with him, with us, honoring, walking silently behind his bed down to the main double doors of the surgical unit where we were not permitted to enter. So many people were packed shoulder to shoulder in the hallways. It stopped traffic, causing hospital staff and other visitors to stand and stare while the procession passed by. They clearly wondered who the young man was on the bed being rolled before them, manned with doctors and nurses, one kneeling on the bed, continuing chest compressions the entire way. That was what Noah built with his 21 years of life. Honor, integrity, trust, brotherhood, and love. I truly could not have imagined any greater send-off that would have meant more to him than what was given by these men and women at 2 o'clock in the morning. People who came because they wanted to, because they loved Noah and who he was and who he strived to become. The people he respected and revered the most came at 2 a.m. to show equal honor to their fallen brother. I can never thank them enough. I stood at the surgical door, watching through the window till they wheeled him completely out of view. We worked our way back to his room to gather our things that we had accumulated over the days, thanking the nurses and doctors who had treated our son from the ER to the TICU. We made the long walk back to the main entrance at security, where I was told I had to go to collect Noah's pocket knife that had been found in his jeans pocket at the ER. The security guards were talking about him as we approached. That young man in TICU that was brought in Monday night, they donated his organs tonight. Did you see all those people? Then he really must have been someone. Their apologies for our loss were profound. We headed up in the parking garage to our car, friends and family carrying bags and boxes for us. Everyone drove out except us. As the last person's headlights disappeared down the level, I was in the driver's seat. Bud looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" "Whenever you're ready, babe." I grabbed the steering wheel and began sobbing uncontrollably, near screaming. The concept of what was being done inside the surgical unit overwhelmed my brain, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I wanted desperately to undo everything, to go back to that night when he called and asked if it was okay if he went to Dana's house. I wanted to go back and to tell him, yes, I do mind. Wouldn't have been true, but I wanted to say, please go to dinner with us, or turn right on Convey to get to Bartow Highway instead of going down Main to Reynolds. It's anything to make it not have happened. I want him back. Give him back to me, was all that I could say. We sat in the car crying, and after a while drove home to the empty silence of our home that now felt like a place I did not recognize. The only peace I could find was in remembering the army of people who stood for him at the end, and in knowing his organ donation was a heroic, life-saving gesture for others. October 12th, 2017. We remember you. We elected to have Noah's memorial service the following Friday. Suddenly, once again, people who loved and cherished Noah were flying and driving in from around the country. Our county's sheriff asked to speak at his service. FWC, Florida Wildlife Commission, approached us, saying they wanted to do something to honor Noah at Ten Rock, as well as they wanted to send the FWC Honor Guard to open and close Noah's memorial service, so there would be a presentation of the flags. Dennis Rogers, probably one of the most well-known professional performing strongmen, was going to fly in for the service because to Noah he was an uncle. We asked him if he would speak as well. Dana wanted to include something and asked Noelle Berry, a retired sheriff's deputy and close family friend whom Noah greatly loved, to read what she wrote. She and her husband, Eric, also a deputy, were among his old dudes. Pastors Charlie Walker, who baptized Noah and knew his papa, Bud's dad, very well. Wayne Roberts, now the lead head pastor of the church where we held the service, and formerly Bud's youth pastor, and also Kenny Hughes, the pastor who married us, with whom we had a close friendship with him and his wife, Diane. Kenny was very much a classic car buff, as was Noah. In fact, Noah's first car was a 1967 El Camino, which he purchased from Kenny when Noah was only 20. Kenny and his oldest son, Mark, a firefighter and paramedic, arrived at our house the morning of the memorial with a trailer to take the El Camino, which didn't have a plate on it yet, to the church across town so it could be present and on display as part of the service. We elected to have Noah cremated, as those were his wishes. We chose several of Noah's closest friends to each carry a different element of his life for which he was well known or loved. His Bailey Wind River Morgan hat, which had become iconic among those he met during his internship at Yellowstone Park, as well as his friend's family and the Tenorock Range. A steel scroll that had been a Christmas gift from my parents. The .50 caliber Hawken that Dana found for him, as Robert Redford's character in Jeremiah Johnson was significant to Noah. His Krieghoff shotgun that he used in competition and for which he was on the Krieghoff DuPont youth team. His blue Vulcan gi and current belt, so close to nearing his black level in Gracie Barra Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when he passed. His Shoot for a Cure Pro Team competition jersey. One of his favorite guitars. His banjo. One of his motorcycle helmets. And his fly fishing rod. We had just over 300 pictures in the slideshow presentation during the visitation, immediately followed by the service. I felt we had planned and arranged everything as best we possibly could for the service to honor our son. That morning, as we got ready to go, my heart was beating out of my chest. I could not believe we were heading for our son's memorial service. I had decided I wanted to give Noah's eulogy. It was important to me because I wanted people to celebrate Noah's life and remember him well, with love and joy, and not with sorrow. As I stood staring in the mirror, I didn't recognize the reflection looking back at me. I looked like I had aged 15 years. My face looked pudgy and puffy, not just from crying, but as though I was retaining every toxic chemical grief could hold. I suddenly regretted my choice to speak. How in the world was I going to do this? I didn't even want to go, let alone stand up there and speak. I wanted to go lay on Noah's bed and not move from there till it was my turn to leave this earth. I walked out into the kitchen where Bud stood at the sink, leaning against it. I walked over to him. "Are you okay?" He lowered his head and said, "I don't want to do this." I said, "Yeah, I know. Me either. But I got you. You got me?" He smiled at me and said, "Always." We walked out and got in the car and drove the 20 minutes across town to the church. There were already people parked outside waiting for the visitation to start, and we were there early. Bud said, "I have a feeling it's going to be standing room only during the service." I really have no idea how many people came for the visitation. There was a long line leading from the lobby all the way down to the front where we were. You could see through the door windows that people were bunched up in the lobby area waiting to come in. News crews with reporters and cameras showed up and began filming from the back. It stayed that way until the very end, running the visitation line into the service time to get everyone through. I was staring at Bud in disbelief when he leaned towards me and asked, "Are those reporters with news crews?" I shrugged and shook my head in confusion. It's one thing when you think your son, who's just now becoming a man, is something out of this world. It's quite another when you see you weren't the only one who thought so. I had no clue who so many of these people were, but person after person stopped to shake my hand, telling me some random story of something Noah had done that touched their life in a deep way. Whether because of an act of random kindness on his part, or some great gesture that unselfishly benefited many, which I had never known about because Noah didn't brag. Doing the right thing was just what we were supposed to do as a member of mankind. And that's what Noah thought. Helping others was part of being a good person, a responsible member of society, and didn't require recognition. There were just over 500 people in attendance at the service. The church was packed. I was seated on the front row, staring at my son's collection of memorabilia, thinking, I don't have anything up there that was even capable of recognizing his commitment and passion to first responders, specifically law enforcement. And then Sheriff Grady Judd stood up to speak on his experiences with Noah and his exemplary character as a young man. He summed it up beautifully and strongly, and then he presented the one thing that Noah dreamed of, but was just months shy of earning, his oath of office as a Polk County Sheriff's deputy. That's when I lost it. I'd been getting through everything for about 3 hours and holding it together, but that put me over the edge. I knew the weight of what that plaque meant to Noah, and ironically, I also know if Noah had been standing there, he would have said, I can't accept this. I didn't finish earning it yet. I spoke just after Noel, who followed Sheriff Judd. I was still stuck back on that oath of office. As I stood at the pulpit ready to speak, I looked out into the sea of people, seeing officer after officer in their dress blues. I later learned that Sheriff Judd had sent out an interoffice memo that deputies attending Noah Jeffries' memorial service from PCSO should be in this uniform, and it was circulated to the Lakeland Police Department as well. Sheriff Judd presented us with Noah's plaque after the service outside on the lawn. He told us he had to call the state to get the go-ahead, but in the history of the Florida law enforcement, no one has ever been posthumously sworn in. Noah is the first. As people milled about, heading over to the large fellowship hall for the lunch provided by the church members, I was stopped by a woman with the sheriff's office. She said, I wanted to tell you, I knew your son too, but not from all this. I knew of him because during Hurricane Irma, after the damage had been done, we had calls about a young man on a blue Harley-Davidson riding in the rain with a chainsaw, cutting down trees, carrying the trunks and limbs to the side of the road to clear paths for the emergency vehicles to get through. It turned out it was your son. Another chill ran through me as I remembered that evening a month earlier and him telling me that he was taking his Harley because it can get through where regular and large-sized vehicles can't. It was like he knew, even in the face of the fear he had at that time, that something ominous was coming, which made him question his own mortality. He was planning to be of use and assist in a way that perhaps others wouldn't be able to, protecting and keeping others safe, always seeing several moves ahead. That was him. That was Noah. The following sections contain the transcribed speeches given during Noah's memorial service as they were delivered by Sheriff Grady Judd, Dennis Rogers, Noel Berry, and myself. Oath of Office by Grady Judd. I saw Noah bend one of those nails. I said, man, if he got hold of me, I'd just shoot him. And they said, well, he could shoot you too. It's difficult but appropriate to read this quote by General George Patton. It's foolish and wrong to mourn the men who died, but rather we should thank God that such men lived. And I thank God that I had the privilege of knowing Noah Jeffries. He filled the room with electricity. He never met a stranger. He was the young man we wish all men would emulate. Noah learned early on what it takes most people to discover, and that's this. The people you surround yourself with influence who you become, and it starts with a great mom and dad and grandparents. Noah loved his job at Tenorock as the shooting clays manager. He enjoyed being around the veterans and law enforcement officers. He called them the old dudes, his old dudes. And on any given day you could find Noah hanging out with his old dudes. Bud told me that when Noah was 13 years old, he may have been the only 13-year-old in the entire country whose best buddy was a 70-year-old veteran. Noah knew, as did Socrates, that the only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. So he sought out those with life experiences to learn about life. Noah exposed himself to extraordinary adults until the extraordinary seemed ordinary, and then Noah followed that example. Noah lived what he learned from people who he believed were exemplary. Noah's philosophy was simply, why would I ask someone my own age to do something instead of asking someone who's already been around a long time and already knows what to do? We can all learn from Noah's wisdom. Heather, you said your son was a throwback kind of person, like someone who came from a different time, and I suggested that I thought of him as an old soul in a young man's body. He was wise beyond his years as just a very young man. His friend, Kevin Widener, is a retired captain with the sheriff's office. He described Noah as the last of a dying breed, a true Southern gentleman. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. We became attached to him at 14 years old, and he could carry on a conversation with an adult as easy as he could, or maybe easier than another 14-year-old. It was always yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, with Noah. Respect was given by him to those he was around. Period. That was who he was. Before I get too long, I want to share another milestone in Noah's life, where it intersected with Sergeant Tom Dombrowski. The very first time Tom had met Noah was shortly after Noah had started dating his daughter Dana. True to a dad mode of operation, Tom gave Noah the 50-question interrogation. I'm sure the sheriff's office sergeant had something to do with this technique, and the fact that Tom had worked for a long time in investigations. He knew how to interrogate people. During the questioning, Tom, with much success, found out that Noah knew Captain Kevin Widener. So Tom did what any good father would do. He called up his buddy Kevin, and the phone call went something like this. Hey, Captain. What can you tell me about this kid named Noah Jeffries? Kevin said, oh, no, what did he do? To which there was a long, silent pause on the phone before Tom said, well, he's dating my daughter. Kevin, very glad that Noah wasn't in trouble, and would have been totally shocked if he was, because he never was, exclaimed, that's absolutely great. He's the kind of young man you want your daughter to date. Now, I know Noah through the clay shoots. In 2014, he was part of my friend Lynn Oakley's team, and they placed third that year. Noah picked up marksmanship kind of late in life. He was 14 before he was winning all kinds of recognition, but quickly becoming proficient. As you know, it wasn't very long before he was an instructor at Tenor Rock, and then before that he managed. Kevin said Noah could take an aspirin and tape it to the inside of a metal washer, shoot it through the air, and then shoot the aspirin with a .22. He said he could do that with a quarter, but he'd keep it. There was another time Noah's old dudes needed a fourth for a clay shoot. Now you understand, we're not just shooting clays. These people are competitive. They want to win. So they asked Noah. Well, now, Noah didn't have those fancy over-under shotguns or semi-automatics. Those guns they paid $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and $25,000 for. He had a pump shotgun. He showed up with that, and he outshot all those old experts and their expensive guns. They were some kind of upset that this very young guy with an old pump shotgun whooped them all, as we say in Polk County. Noah was not only a master-class shooter, he was a master-class person. Sadly, today we can say the world has indeed lost a great, great young man. Heather and Bud, Noah loved you, and you know that, to the ends of the earth. He loved all of his family dearly, but his greatest compliment to you was his admiration to the point of emulation. He gleaned that good Southern etiquette from his peers, his family, his grandparents, and his parents. Noah understood the best lessons are gained just from taking time to learn from those that have gone before. He knew what it was like to stand on the shoulders of giants, but Noah sought out those giants on whose shoulders to stand. Noah may have only spent 21 short years with us on this earth, but he accomplished so much more. In fact, he accomplished more than some men who lived to be 100 years old would ever hope to accomplish. The character Maximus from the movie Gladiator said this: "What we do in life echoes throughout all of eternity." Lahey-Jeffries will echo in our hearts and in our souls forever. He left this world better than he found it, but selfishly, I know there are thousands of people Noah could have and definitely would have helped if God would have given him more time here on earth. But we can be comforted knowing that even in death, Noah's last, greatest contribution was that he saved 6 lives because his family generously shared Noah's strong body with the people who were desperately in need of their life being saved. As a close, I'm thinking about how Noah was preparing to put himself through the next police academy. He wanted to be a deputy, and I so wanted and looked forward to the day that I could give him the oath of office to be a deputy sheriff for me. Well, today, for the first time in the history of the sheriff's office, I'm going to swear Noah in as a deputy sheriff. And it goes like this. You, William Noah Jeffries, do you swear you will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the government of the United States and the state of Florida? That you are duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state, and that you will well and faithfully perform the duties of deputy sheriff throughout all eternity? Will you perform these duties on which you are now about to enter posthumously, so help you God? The response I heard was, absolutely. So I leave this message with you today because I believe Noah would want you to know and practice what Jesus taught us in Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, as we show you his oath of office. Let us not become weary of doing good, because at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. Bud, Heather, family, that last message he gave us was exactly what we would expect of Noah. May God continue to bless you forever. Iron sharpens iron. Dennis Rogers. My name is Dennis Rogers, and I'm a professional strongman, just like Bud. You could probably tell that from our similar physiques. In 2004, I read an article that Bud had written called Outlaw Strength, and he said some very kind things about me, so I contacted him to thank him. I knew of him, and of course, he obviously knew of me, but we never met. I was doing a show in Savannah, Georgia, and we made an agreement. Hey, let's all meet there. And he came down and brought Heather and Noah with him. Now, you got 3 strongmen in the room because Noah, at 8 years old, was already doing strongman feats. So the first thing he did is he bent over and grabbed a chair, and he had Bud sit on his back like this. And then he lifted Bud up and down. And I'm like, Bud is 350 pounds. He's got 24-inch arms and who knows, maybe a 60-inch chest. And I go, man, I don't know. I hope he doesn't ask me to lift him. And Bud was into tough guy fighting, and so he was teaching Noah how to fight. So Noah is showing me at that point how hard he can hit. He's hitting Bud. Bam, bam. And I'm not kidding you. You could hear the stings. I'll bet you if you were a block away, you could hear that. He punches his palm with his fist, and Noah turns to me and says, "You should see what happens when I hit him when he's not looking." Bud heard him and says, "Man, one time I was doing something and Noah spun around and kicked me in the side of the head, and you know all the fighting I've been in." He said, "He hit me so hard he almost put me down." But I could see Noah's spunk and how much he wanted to do the strongman thing, so we went out to eat and I taught him how to bend spoons. I do a lot of things with my fingers, and I taught him how to take spoons and make them into snakes, like cobras and rattlesnakes and stuff. And from what I understand, he's bent them in restaurants all over, everywhere. I think they said they have something like 30-some spoons at home when they were going through the things, getting all of this stuff together. Noah started taking strength to a whole new level. Now, I want you to understand this. When Noah was 12 years old, and I consider myself an expert on strength, I've been doing it for over 3 decades, and I've been involved with all different facets of strength. But Noah, at 12 years old, now, he does it off of a rack and he had some straps, but it doesn't matter. He's 12 years old, and he did what you call a rack deadlift. It's just a few inches, but he lifted 1,000 pounds. At age 14, he came to my apartment, and he had really gotten into bending other things. In the world of strongman, the thing to bend in order to say you're a professional strongman, you have to bend this thing called a 60-penny nail. So what you do is, it takes about 250 to 350 pounds of pressure, and you have to do it unbraced. You hold it right here, and you fold it in half with your hands. Well, Noah could do that real easy at 14. Here's the kicker. They have a nail. It's called the red nail, and it's like a contest. The nail takes 480 pounds of pressure. Noah says, watch this. He takes that red nail at 14 years old, and you probably saw the picture up there, gesturing to the overhead display, which had a slideshow of picture of Noah bending the red nail. His eyes are bugging out, and he just goes, and then he's imitating Noah's bending style and facial expression, and then he just folds it in half. No one had ever, I don't think below the age of 18 or 19, had ever folded that red nail in half, and Noah did. So I call one of the top strongmen, and they call him the human vice. His name's Pat Povolitis, and I said, you ain't gonna believe what Noah did. He asks, what did he do? I said, he bent the red nail. Pat said, how did he do it? I said, I'm telling you, he did it totally legit, folded it right up top. He said, wow. And he couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it. He said, it's amazing, but we gotta know. It's Noah, and he's following Bud. Actually, I think he was competing with Bud, but he was trying to surpass him because he was doing some amazing things. When Noah was 15 years old, Bud and I had a seminar where we are teaching people to do a whole variety of things, and one of the things I'm teaching on is how to bend horseshoes. When I do these seminars, I have an easy level of horseshoe, and that's usually about the only thing that anybody gets done. Well, Noah didn't really know much about bending horseshoes, so he wanted to learn too. And I'm not exaggerating. Within 15 minutes, Noah was bending the toughest shoe that we had, because I had a few that I was bending just for show. Noah was flattening them out, and Noah started teaching part of the class so we could break up into groups, and Noah just started teaching. Oh, here's how you bend a horseshoe. And now he's learned it in just under 15 minutes, and he's doing it. He loved to do that, to help people. At age 16, he proved he was one of the world's strongest teenagers, definitely one of the world's strongest grips of any age. He took 1,100 pounds. Just to give you an idea, that would be on today's standards, about 6 refrigerators. 6 full-size refrigerators, like would go in an apartment. He took 1,100 pounds off the rack. Technically, they do a deadlift with a reverse grip. And he had a forward-facing grip with a fairly thick bar, 1 3/8 inches thick, knuckles straight out, which is much harder, and then lifted the 1,100 pounds off of the rack. Now, I want you to think about the grip strength that's got everything to do with the grip, mainly to hang on to 1,100 pounds in your hands. And he's 16 years old. That's amazing. When he was just 17, I was so impressed with all the things Bud had been sending me. Things of him lifting rock. Dennis holds up a steel scroll on display of a flat bar bent into the fish shape with a 3/8 inch round, tightly woven and wrapped around the center of the body that Noah had dubbed Crom's Koi, as he said. And how many of you agree? That is pretty phenomenal. A teenager bent that. You understand? A teenager. This right here is a world-class bend. So at 17, I take him to the Stark Center Museum for Physical Culture. Dr. Terry Todd is one of the top authorities on feats of strength and the curator. I took him up there and Pat and Noah bent stuff for him. Bud went with us. Today, Noah has stuff displayed there at the Stark Center Museum. So if you ever get to Austin, Texas, at the University of Texas, and go to the Stark Center, and as soon as you walk in the glass, you will see things that Noah Jeffries bent that they felt were world-class things that needed to be put on display there, especially world-class as a teenager. When we left there, I think I gave you the chisel afterwards. He's addressing Bud when he says this. And he continues, he came to my house and I gave him this cold chisel. Okay, so a lot of you know what this is, but this is a cold chisel. That's 3/8 inch thick and only 6 inches long. There's no leverage. You can push it down and bend it on your leg. You have to bend it up here, and he demonstrates at chest level. See, Noah folded the cold chisel. If you had been watching that on the screen, and Dennis points up referencing to the slideshow presentation overhead, he continues, it was the blue thing that he was holding in his hands. That's one of the most phenomenal bends of all time, and what they call an unbraced bend. And again, he was 17 years old when he did it. But what I want you to understand is that Noah wasn't just a strong man. He was a strong man. He showed us that's not how long you live, but how you live. He had a great attitude. He was extremely respectful. He loved helping people. He had a character, and I mean this sincerely. I mean, I used to be a youth pastor that I have never personally seen before in someone his age. In just everything. I mean, he would come stay with my wife and me, and he wouldn't let me pick anything up. He's just running and grabbing stuff and helping everybody. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. He was just, oh, man. I mean, just what a joy. Bud and Heather called the house to check on Noah, and Maria, my wife, said, oh, he can stay here as long as he wants. He could stay forever. She didn't care. She loved him that much. Both of us did. But now he's in heaven, and I think, oh, how glorious that must be. I mean, we can't even fathom how glorious that is. So I want to ask you all something. No one needs to answer out loud. Just think about it. If God was to come here right now, right this minute, and say, I know y'all love Noah very much. I'll tell you what, if y'all want, I'll bring him back. How many would want to take him out of the arms of Jesus? And even if you did, you'd never get his grip loose. Forever and always, Dana's goodbye through Noel Berry. Believe it or not, I'm 51, and I was considered part of Noah's old dudes group. And we got to know Noah through Dana and her parents. He was a wonderful young man, and Dana asked me to read this in honor of Noah. It's what she wrote. Dear Noah, our first date together was perfect. I knew you were the one for me. We talked about everything and anything. We stood on the same side, believed in the same things, and developed trust as if we'd known each other our whole lives. We shared everything in common. We know that God led us together. How could he not have? To give us the ability to love and trust each other from day one. As each day passed, our love grew. Each night we would say, forever and always, after sharing many I love yous. I knew it in my heart to be true. Every day you showed me and told me how much you loved me. I know that just by the way that you looked at me. And then you followed me across the country, and we loved every second of it. We never knew what we would find on our adventures. One thing was for certain, we would love each other more. Once we came back home, all we wanted to do was go back, and then we planned to do so, but God called for you to come home to him. I may never know why he did. I just thank him for sending you into my life. I thank you, God, for giving me the purest, most sincere love. Many people will never know what that feels like. Noah, the 2 years I spent with you were by far the best 2 years ever. Thank you for showing me your love every day and building memories with me. Every memory I have with you, I cherish, from our late night phone calls to talking about our future together and our adventures. I hold all of them dearly. The ring you made for me reminds me of every memory, but most importantly, our never-ending love for each other. You are and always will be the love of my life and my soulmate. Though you were called too soon, I know that you know just how deep my love is for you. Words and actions could never say or show just how much. I always know you could wait for me to get there, and you would. And once I get there, you give me the biggest, best hug and kiss as you did every single time that we saw each other. And then you would open up the gate for me. You were just such a great man. I want you to know that I know you are always watching over me. I know how much you love me, forever and always handsome, and I know you mean it. I love you forever and always, and cannot wait for the day that we are brought back together in even a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, the day Dana brought Noah to my house, the love shined through him. Just like the sun shining down upon us today outside, that is the love he showed every day to Dana and to everyone. We were so blessed to have Noah in our life. I know how dearly he loved you. When we were at dinner the last time together, when Dana spoke, he was in awe. And he was a wonderful young man. John 5:13 says, "No greater man than he who lays his life down for a friend." Noah was that friend to many people. 6 people who are now eternally his friend too. To Dana, you are his one true love. Noah, you will be missed. Noah's eulogy, as given by me, Lahey-Jeffries, his mom. It was important to me to do this for Noah because we homeschooled him and I spent more time with him than probably most anyone else did. We took trips across the country going to different shoots, and I know he had extraordinary friendships, particularly with the gentlemen sitting over there who were his pallbearers. I have no doubt that some of you sitting there who know things about him that I probably don't, and I probably don't want to know. And by the way, referring to the spoons he bent, officers, we offered to pay for the spoons. We didn't just walk out. And since this all began, when someone finds out that Noah passed away, the first thing that they ask is, "What happened?" Then they ask for details of the accident. And really what they're asking us is, how did he die? When someone asks this, they're asking me to tell them about the last 48 hours of his life. Quite frankly, I'd rather tell you how he lived. You see, Noah was only 21, and yes, it's true, that is an exceptionally young age, but he lived an exceptional life in that time. Not just exceptional in his achievements, but in his character, as has already been addressed, his commitment and his passion for life. I mean, when he got an idea in his head about how he thought something should be or something he wanted to do, you could not stop him till he found a way to achieve it. Words like quit, can't, and surrender, and they simply did not exist in his vocabulary. I do not recall a time he ever said, "I give up." If you told him, "Just quit, it's useless, no one can do this," or "there's no point," all it would do is make him try that much harder to prove to you or the universe that it could be done. He saw the world differently. Everyone was worth helping. I don't know if he just took superhero slogans too close to heart, but truth, justice, and the American way was something he wanted to embody. The concept that everyone who was willing to work and work together and work for a greater good collectively could achieve great things regardless of who they were. I think in his perfect world, He would have lived out west in the mountains as a sheriff or ranger, being a real-life John Wayne character. He was highly protective of others. It didn't matter if the other was human or not. He felt a responsibility and protectiveness of every living thing. When he was 3, he began asking about getting a pet. My parents bought him a 20-gallon fish tank and stand, and we purchased 3 large fantail goldfish. I thought that was a good starter for learning responsibility for a small child. Noah did a great job taking care of them over the years, feeding them, making sure the temperature and balance of the water was correct and the tank was clean. He became very picky about which food we purchased, where we bought it from, and he knew which fish preferred which type of food. Then the day came when one of them, his favorite, passed away. I watched it coming throughout the day, and then around 5 p.m., his little fish gave up the ghost. Through tears, he said, "Mama, we have to bury him now." I found a box the fish would fit in, with Noah insisting it should be a sealed plastic container we could put water in so he could keep swimming. I explained why that wasn't necessary and why it wasn't good for the ground. So Noah took the box and wrapped it in different ribbons, because apparently that's what you do with a goldfish casket. He came out of his room with box in hand and said he was ready to bury his little friend. It was pouring rain outside, but I couldn't take his little face staring at me with those big, weepy eyes, holding his little gift-boxed fish. Okay, I'm sure there are plenty of parents who understand. When they look at you like that, you just say, "Okay, let's go. In the rain, we're going to do this." I grabbed a ladle to dig with because it was the nearest thing to me, and a large umbrella. When we got outside, I thought this would be a quick and simple thing. I was wrong. First, we had to find the exact perfect spot, which entailed knowing where the sun shone the most without being too hot, the view, and the proximity to our house so the fish wouldn't get lonely. Noah had this whole thing in his head of how he knew this would be the perfect spot. Noah finally picks a spot under a giant elephant ear fern beneath his bedroom window. He said that way he and the fish could look out for each other, and they could continue to protect each other. I didn't know fish were protection pets, but again, apparently I was wrong. Noah knew better than me. As I'm digging this hole in the pouring rain, Noah, holding the umbrella, is giving a eulogy and prayer fit for a king, including with it a list of care instructions for God. "And God, when he gets there, can you please put him in the nicest pond in all of heaven? Maybe one with some trees and lots of lily pads, because he really likes lily pads." I don't know how Noah knew this. The fish was born in captivity in a small tank. There were never any lily pads, but apparently Noah knew it. Noah continued, "He likes lock rocks too. They're really cool. You could put them together in different shapes, so he has things to hide and swim around in. Oh, his favorite food is goldfish Tetra Flakes from Nolan's Aquarium. It's $3.99 for a small container. He sort of likes the nuggets, but not as much as the flakes. And if Jesus is fishing, can you please make sure my fish doesn't swim near his hooks?" Had this way about him. He just knew how he wanted everything done all of the time. And then we had the blessing, which somehow involved asking blessings for every single person Noah knew. I had no idea that a 7-year-old could know that many people, but he did. And it was this very, very long prayer. "Please bless this person and give them a good life." It was really beautiful. When he finished his list, I said, "That was beautiful, sweetie. You did a great job. Okay, anything else? We should go in. It's pouring rain, baby. Let's go in before you get soaked." He said, "Well, we need to have a song. You're supposed to sing a song at the end." I said, "Oh, okay, sure. What song do you want to sing?" I'm expecting him to say some hymnal song he'd heard or something along those lines. Yeah, no, not my son. No, no, no. My son looks me dead in the eye and says, "I think Whiskey for my men and beer for my horses would be the right song. I'm sorry, what now? Noah said, yeah, whiskey for my men and beer for my horses. That's the right one. It was his favorite. It seems like the right song to sing, like at the end. I asked, whiskey for my men and beer for my horses was the fish's favorite song. Is that what you're telling me, son? He said, yes, ma'am. Gathering all my reserve to not laugh, Noah was so very serious and truly, truly heartbroken. So he was as solemn as he could possibly be in this moment. So I just simply said, okay. So there I stood in the pouring rain under a giant golf umbrella, ladle in hand, belting out my best rendition of whiskey for my men and beer for my horses, which in truth I only knew the chorus. But Noah knew the whole thing, word for word, and prompted me through the entire song. When the song was over, we're walking back inside, Noah's hand in mine, and I said, you did a really good job. I'm so proud of you. Noah said, thanks. That's how it should always be, Mom. That song, that's what everyone should play at the end. I thought that was a little odd, and I asked him why, as I was trying to keep a straight face, because this was traumatic to him, and he felt like he did this really powerful and wonderful thing for this little fish who was his friend. Noah said, it's a good song. It's about guys who spent their days stopping bad guys and doing what they had to all together to keep their town safe. Like old West Sheriff stuff. That's what I'm going to do one day. He was 7. He continued, yeah, that song should be at the end. And then sometimes he had this way of saying things very dramatically. And he said this like he was reciting Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. He said, because they raise up their glasses against evil forces. He was adamant about it. And then he said, I like that. Noah's name, William Noah, literally translated means he who will be conqueror and the bringer of peace. When we were picking names, that just resonated with me because that was who I felt like this child would become one day. Noah means peace or bearer of peace. That's who he was to me. It's funny, given all the things he did, which many people would attribute to the complete opposite. He loved trick shooting and target shooting and jujitsu and boxing and doing things that pushed the limits of human endurance and ability. But then when he entered a room, there was peace. There was peace for me every time he walked in. I just felt this sense of peace. Everything's okay. He would do absolutely anything to help someone, and he respected everyone. He was a character with an amazing sense of humor who could make most anyone laugh in any situation, even a situation like this. I'm sure if he could speak right now, he would have a host of jokes he would be telling everybody, trying to make us laugh. But it was always his heart that got me the most. To watch him with his family, his friends, his dogs, the cats, any animal. They love them all. We have 5 dogs, 5, and 2 cats in the house, and all of them are there because of Noah, because he never gave up on anything. He couldn't stand to see anything hurt, alone, or scared. They would come home, and he would try to find placement for them, and when there was no placement to be found, he just couldn't give up on them. He said, that's not right. You can't take something in and try to help it and then just turn it over to someone else and say, you'll probably be okay. He just couldn't do it. And I loved his heart and wanted to support him doing what he felt was right. He took the concept of responsibility for others very seriously. The funny part was, he didn't think anything of it. It was just him. He didn't think he was great or better than anyone else. He rarely, if ever, told anyone about his achievements or what he could do, or ways he had already been acknowledged or honored in different sports or activities already at his age. He honestly believed himself to be an ordinary guy with nothing particularly special about himself. I'm one of those people who believes you should tell someone on a regular basis that you love them and that you're proud of them. Every time I would tell him I was proud of him, he would shake his head, scoff a bit, and say, "Okay, Ma, not sure why, but glad you think so." I think he thought that because with all his good, he was a rebel too, which to me is part of what makes someone have a deep passion for adventure in life. Not to just be content with the mundane and monotonous because it's part of schedule or pattern that we keep, but to passionately seek fun and love and the living of life. Truly living, not just existing. Someone who seeks their dreams, grabs on with both hands and rides it to the end, living boldly with the full potential and ability of their mind, body, and spirit. That was my son. That is how he lived. There's a line in the movie Steel Magnolias, and I thought about this the very next morning when we came home from the hospital. I posted on Facebook, if anyone saw it, there was one paragraph in there that read, "I'm terrified. I am terrified to wake up tomorrow morning and not hear his voice in my house, to not have my morning coffee with him." See, there's this list of things that you go through and you think, oh my Lord, this is never going to happen again. I'm so used to this. This is my comfort. This is my joy. This is my love. And it's gone. And it's terrifying in that second. And the next morning when I did wake up, I thought of this scene from the movie Steel Magnolias. When Sally Field's character, the mom, is arguing with her daughter, Julia Roberts' character, that keeps repeating in my head. The daughter says, "I'd rather have 30 minutes of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special." I talked to Dana probably 20 minutes after I had that thought. I told her that because it brought me such comfort. Because I thought, God, that's exactly what my son was for me. That's what that was. He was 30 minutes of wonderful versus a lifetime of nothing special. See, in 21 years, Noah packed everything good and great into his life. Then I am heartbroken that he's gone, but I feel the same way. In 21 years, he made an indelible mark, which to me is better than a 70-year life of never having done anything or having lived it selfishly. In his passing, and I said this to Dana too, because it's what I thought of in the moment, I feel like the scorched ground after a rocket takes off. But man, what a view. I am so honored to be his mother and to know the person he chose to be. Noah has a plaque in his room that reads, "If you're willing to get in the saddle, you better be ready for the ride." He was. Every minute of every day. I know my son, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that had things worked out differently, had he recovered, he would have gotten back on that bike. He would have had it repaired or bought another one. He would have done so with my encouragement as well, because nothing comes from fear except the stopping of living your life. That's what makes extraordinary. That's how you build it. When things are the most terrifying and you think you might not succeed, you dig your heels in and keep going. You find that strength inside yourself to find something amazing on the other side. That's what my son did, and that's what we're going to do. We will continue his legacy of doing good, putting others first, and living boldly without fear. I love you, Noah. Past the moon, beyond the stars, back again. Noah's legacy. It was Sunday night, October 15th. The phone had stopped ringing, text tones had slowed, and most people's lives had seemed to resume some sort of normalcy. But not ours. It seemed ours would never be normal again. This was the new normal, where constant waves of sorrow and random surges of rage would roll and flow. People were beginning to say things to me that were mundane and everyday parts of life, but I couldn't hear anything. Felt like I was screaming and no one could hear me. I said to Bud as we sat in our usual places in the living room with the TV playing something and commercials showing family moments, which caused me to tear up without warning. This is like breathing ice water. All of this, the world around us is just going on, and people are oblivious to where we are in conjunction to them. I feel disconnected. It's like everyone is standing on a thick sheet of ice above us, living their lives, carrying on. But to me, it's muffled voices and blurry shapes. The whole while we are trapped under the ice, getting dragged along by grief and despair, raking at the ice to stop and find pockets of oxygen. And no one can hear or see us. He said, "Damn, God, yeah, that is exactly how it feels." I said, "I can't take this. I can't do this." And he was so much good. He was so much that he was going to do, and that he was going to be amazing, and he was going to help others. I can't just let that go. I don't want people to forget about him and what he stood for. Man, so many people came out. So many people seemed impacted by him. Bud said, "I agree. I mean, how could they not be? We need to do something." I said, "Yeah, we do. Maybe we can find ways to help support the things and the people who he was dedicated to, the things that he wanted to do with his life. I mean, if we can find ways to encourage others, help and support them, then his dreams still live in some way, and the good that he would have been is still here, still working." Bud said, "Absolutely, man, we could do this for Noah, for what he cared about." I said, "I keep thinking about all those people at the hospital that night." He said, "Me too. They were like an army, man. It was like Noah's army." I said, "Yeah, Noah's army." And I felt Noah in that moment. It was a perfect calming wave that moved through the room and filled it with peace, just like he did whenever he walked in. Very often now when I think of him, I am reminded of the country song by Craig Campbell and Dave Turnbull, "Outskirts of Heaven." So the lyrics perfectly match Noah for every step. I actually first heard the song a few months after Noah passed. I was stunned because when he was a child, after hearing a description of heaven, he specifically said he wanted to live on the edge of heaven, like the outskirts of town, because he liked the country and the mountains better. And it's where I imagine him to be now, in some idyllic cabin near mountains, fishing and riding horses, doing and being everything he dreamed of since he was a boy. Noah was my heaven on earth. Here on our farm, watching him fish, hike, garden, plant, harvest, work, learn, and grow, becoming the man I knew he was destined to be. We didn't do things like everyone else. We were on the outskirts of everything, but it worked for us, and it was beautiful. And I am profoundly grateful for every moment of every day we had together as a family. The measure of a life. It's not like the sorrow of missing him ever goes away. I've heard people say it gets easier. I have no clue what they're talking about. If anything, I feel like it's increasingly more difficult, but the one thing that keeps me going is following his path and character of putting others first and doing the best good we can. My first birthday after Noah passed, I was consumed by thoughts of the count of years he lived on this earth as compared to my own. I was 26 when he was born. I had already lived 5 years longer than him. I had already done some pretty great things, been part of some amazing engineering projects, owned my own business, seen some wonderful places, but nothing, absolutely nothing, ended up comparing to him. I was going through some of his pictures in his Dropbox account. There were so many photos that I had never seen. Some he took, some that were sent to him, but it gave me another perspective of how he saw the world, how he saw the beauty in it, and it gave me a greater appreciation of things he had discussed with me over the years of what he wanted to do in his life and why. As I swiped through the images, one in particular jumped out at me. It's the close-up of the rings of a young cut tree. I have no clue why it was taken, but I loved the angle and the perspective of the shot. Had I looked at it last September, I probably would have only noticed those facets of the image, but this time I just sat staring at the rings of the trunk. The limb or tree in the picture was actually not much older than Noah, maybe only by 3 years. I found it ironic that the picture of this tree that he or Dana took for whatever reason had been cut down at not much older than his age. We determine the age of a tree by its rings. Small blights and imperfections in the different areas suggest injury, sickness, marring, and tell the tree's history along with its age. To some degree, we do the same with people. He or she passed at this age, and we make assumptions of who they were, what they may or may not have yet achieved, and are saddened by the finality of the count of their years, or lack of them. It's definitive, too, like the bark of the tree, the final year, the end of the life. When I was a child, my grandfather would take me to my favorite park. Any time I spent with him, he always found a way to teach me something profound that really I didn't grasp the weight of the lesson till I was an adult. One day in particular, he took me to the lake, placed a small stone in my hand, and told me to throw it in as far out as I possibly could. I did so, and we stood there for a moment. He asked me what I saw. I so clearly remember staring at the surface of the water, wondering what it was he wanted me to see. I shrugged and answered questioningly, little waves? He smiled and laughed and said, yes, exactly. He crouched down next to me and told me to keep watching and tell him what I noticed. After a while, I said that the waves came to the edge and then went back out. He hugged me and said, yes, the stone you threw in is like a choice, and the lake is life. Everything we do ripples out and touches those around us, even if we never see them, and then eventually comes back to us in one way or another. I never forgot it. It stuck with me so deeply that it became the same way I explained the concept to Noah. Your life and the choices that you make echo back to you and impact everyone around you, whether you realize it or not. They ripple out just as the stone is cast into the lake, and eventually, no matter the size or time, they will reach the shore and work their way back. Perhaps the years by which we measure human life should not be as definitive and simple as the rings by which we measure a tree's age, but instead by the ripples of the impact their actions leave in the body of water that is life. I have witnessed some extraordinary things since Noah's passing, things that transpired only because of who he was and the choices he made, things people want to do for the good, and ways people have been inspired to make changes in their own lives for the better. These are Noah's ripples that he left behind, and they are still impacting people. So, while his chronological age may have only been 21, his choices live on in others, and will echo back to him in the ethos for the good, in love, that he may be remembered well. It is for this reason that the Noah's Army slogan is, leave a massive wake of inspiration and kindness with your life. It's difficult for me to fathom years stretching ahead of me, years without Noah. But I hope that regardless of their number, I am able to continue Noah's ebbs of respect, kindness, generosity, strength, and laughter, to leave them for others, not just as a memory, but a way of life for the future. These are days that are heavy, and grief is so thick it's difficult to get out of bed, but then occasionally I have dreams. Amazing, beautiful dreams of him, and I'm comforted by them. One of my favorites, thus far, goes like this. I was in a huge field with towering pines standing on a path. I felt lost and alone and not sure which way to go. And suddenly, Noah appeared. He handed me a yellow flower with a dark center, similar to a black-eyed Susan. Noah loved photography, as did Noah. They returned from Yellowstone with some incredible pictures. One in particular they took was a yellow flower laying on a dirt path, and the macro focal on the flower. All the height blue of the sky and the greens of the trees was blurred but visible. In the dream, the flower he handed me made me think of that photo. He said, "Yep, that's the one," as though he had intentionally wanted me to remember that picture. He continued, "Remember it, and that I am only on the path ahead of you. I will leave flowers for you to follow, and they'll be every good thing you do for others. Gather them, and when you catch up with me, you can give me the bunch, and then I'll know that that's how you remembered me." I looked ahead and could see flowers suddenly on the path ahead of me. Then he smiled and said, "And don't forget, just because you can't see me doesn't mean I don't have a clear shot of you." Then he winked at me because it was something he used to say about target shooting and jiu-jitsu moves. It made me laugh because it was so very him, and to make me laugh in the middle of an intense emotional moment, and it still applied to what he was trying to tell me in the dream, as it applied to my inability to see him now. It was the first time in a very long time I woke myself up because I was laughing in the face of grief, because my son's spirit and memory are carried in our hearts and in every good thing we will do for Noah's Army. An indelible life. The memorial to Noah dedicated by the state's Florida Wildlife Commission is a U.S. flagpole, and it's an honor area at the entrance to Tenorock Park, located in Lakeland, Florida. Noah had always felt that as a state-owned facility, a flagpole should have been present. We agreed this would be a wonderful way to honor Noah's memory, along with a plaque, which is affixed to the garden wall at the base of the flagpole. The plaque has Noah's picture, position with FWC, as well as the dates of his birth and death. Inside the education building is a large framed plaque with another picture of Noah and his biography. Along with his posthumous oath of office to the Polk Sheriff's Department, Noah was also posthumously awarded his black belt in Gracie Barra Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Noah's organ donation saved the lives of 4 people on October 6, 2017. Recipients included a gentleman with a family who received Noah's liver, a young woman who was in nursing school received one of his kidneys, and another young woman received his other kidney and pancreas. Noah also had a match for his heart. His extraordinary heart, which we are so grateful went to a man with equal love and dedication to his family, whom we have been blessed to meet, Kevin McQueenie. Kevin, a husband, father, and grandfather, had been on the list for years, not finding a match. Just a few months away from being removed from the list, he received the call in the evening of October 5, 2017, that they had found a match for him. Kevin's match to Noah was a special gift to us, as the one thing Noah spoke of and looked forward to the most in life was one day being a father, and then the most coveted, a grandfather. For us, it makes us feel in some way Noah still has his dream, and we were so very excited for the McQueenie family when in April of 2019 they were blessed with another grandson. In true Kevin form, he sent us photos of him holding his newborn grandson against his heart, wearing a Noah's Army t-shirt. Because of Noah's organ donation, Kevin was able to be there for the birth of his grandson, as well as seeing one of his other grandsons graduate from high school. He and his family continue to have opportunities to love and share more memories. Organ donation is a powerful and positive gift we have available to us. There are so very many people on the recipient lists nationwide. It is crucial that those who can register to be an organ donor. There is also a great deal of misinformation and confusion regarding organ donation. Education is paramount. Information and the ability to register, aside from checking yes on your driver's license in the U.S., can be found at donatelife.net. Noah's tissue donations also assisted in the rebuilding of several infants' hearts who were born with defects, and the reconstruction of limbs for 2 veterans recently wounded in combat. Through Noah's Army, we continue to promote organ and blood donation awareness. Bud has a tattoo on his right forearm that he had done before Noah passed. NDWQ. It stands for Not Dead, Won't Quit. He had it done in a square, in columns, with a Viking font, turning the letters 4 times, so no matter which way someone faces him, one NDWQ is clear and visible. It's a mindset we raised Noah with to never give up, to always strive and persevere. Noah loved that tattoo and talked of getting one similar one day. After he passed and people continued to do things, making dreams and goals Noah had for himself still become a reality, Bud had another tattoo done on his left forearm to match the first. This one reads DSWQ, meaning dead, still won't quit. He took it to another level, having the letters appear mirrored backwards, because it was his way of communicating that the message was actually from Noah on the other side. We will never quit. Afterward. Since our founding in October of 2017, Noah's Army Foundation Incorporated has assisted women leaving domestic violence, assisted seniors and veterans, established scholarships for first responders in Polk County, Florida, is providing high-quality ballistic vests for canine dogs, and working on a music program for children in long-term health care, as well as other efforts within our community to be of service to others. And in case you're wondering, yes, we did play Whiskey for My Men and Beer for My Horses as the exit song during Noah's memorial service. Oh, and to Mr. Robert Downey Jr., if you ever happen to learn of this, I'll pick up where Noah left off. Dedication. There are so many amazing people who touched our son's life. It would be impossible to list everyone. So I leave you with this. To all those he so greatly loved, thank you for sharing in our son's life, being his friend and family, and contributing to the man he became. William Noah Jeffries, July 11, 1996 to October 4th, 2017.